Pajo Gobind Pool mat jah Manas janam ka ehi laah Pajo Gobind Pool mat jah मानस जानम का एही लाह गुर सेवा ते भगत कमाई तब ये मानस देही पाए इस देही को सिमरै देव सो देही भज हर की सेव सो देही भज हर की सेव भजो गोबिंद फूल मात जा मानस जानम का एही लाह.
So, welcome friends to another podcast in the Holy Truth series, given as always in the name of the Supreme Lord, who once again wishes to impart the very highest truth of what many call God, life and creation to the sincere seekers of the world, especially for the modern age, that's further supported by the holy masters, perfect saints and noble mystics of Sant today. Now this high truth of the ages is the noble path of Sant, or path of the true saints, also known as the universal truth, true spirituality or true religion, that is so graciously gifted to seeking humanity by the great holy masters, perfect saints and noble mystics in every age, who are themselves the true representatives of the Supreme Lord even today. And although this is little known among the masses, once encountered, a truth seeker can easily recognize that this noble path or true way encompasses all true faiths and beliefs, as this noble source of all is the source of all religions, and it is found in our humble literature, spiritual centers or YouTube channel, and elsewhere in the Holy Discourse series of ISTAuk.com. But before I begin today's session of spiritual questions and answers, I would first like to make a short introduction about who we are and what we represent here today. We are the International Spiritual Truth Association, or ISTA for short, and although now global, we originally set up in 2016 in the UK by request of the Holy Masters of the day, who derived their authority from Great Master Baba Savan Singh Ji of the holy lineage of Sant in India, the Levant and Persia. Now our given mission is simple: to tell the full truth about true spirituality or true religion from the Supreme Lord's point of view, especially for the modern age, while also correcting the confusions of the past and even that of the present about what is the real truth. Yet this high teaching is not new. It is the age-old path of true spirituality, known today as the holy truth of Sant, which in fact has been discreetly taught throughout the ages to the most sincere seekers of the time, alongside the more familiar religions or philosophical teachings that we all know of. Indeed, Holy Masters tell us that the simple teachings of mass religion and mass philosophy are only there to elevate the masses to the position of higher truth seeking, so that they can understand and ultimately practice true spirituality or true religion. Therefore, our mission here today is simple: to impart the very highest truth of the Supreme Lord to those who wish to know, with all the love, grace and wonder that such a gift entails. Now for those who do listen and take heed, Holy Masters tell us that they are indeed the most fortunate ones of humanity. As for myself, I am a sincere devotee of the very highest truth of Sant, who has given his life in the service of the true Lord. As such, I do not seek any recognition, praise or reward, as I only act with the authority and by request of the Supreme Lord itself and the Holy Masters of today, to simply tell the full truth of God's life and creation for the modern age. I humbly speak, therefore, as one who has been gifted with true knowledge of that high truth, and as one who lives in the Supreme Lord's will. Thus, I offer my humble demonstration and knowledge to all who seek the same. Now, as a friend on this noble path to God realization, I only ask that you put aside my human form and instead listen to and take heed of the loving message that the Supreme Lord has to offer you via this humble form, who has himself been transformed by the Holy Masters of today. Thus I represent the proof that truly anyone can rise above their given karmic role, to become truly noble once again by the true Lord's grace, if only they earnestly seek it. Therefore, everything I shall share with you today is a gift of wisdom direct from the true Lord itself, for the sincere seekers of high spiritual truth. In this way, I am a humble servant and a perfect friend, who the true Lord has gifted with direct knowledge of the holy truth, which I have been asked to share with you. So although I shall speak with the authority of one who has been instructed to do so by the Supreme Lord, please do not attempt to praise or glorify this humble servant in any way, for you too are all divine beings undergoing a human experience in this lifetime, though you may not yet be aware of this. Therefore, what is given to me freely by the highest authority, I give to you the same. In return, I only ask that you open your heart and mind to the holy truth that the Supreme Lord has to offer. Now, for those who need further assistance, they may privately contact the main speaker directly via email or video by first subscribing to our valuable information service at ISTAuk.com and then requesting the direct contact details of our main speaker from our administrators. He will endeavour to answer all spiritual queries within 48 hours of receipt. But please be patient if he should take a little longer due to his busy schedule and sheer number of inquiries. Thank you. So, before we begin the question and answer session, I would first like to clarify a few essential points of confusion that has been widely noted among spiritual seekers and others, in order to truly understand what holy initiation by a perfect living master or perfect saint or noble mystic actually means, and thus resolve some continued misunderstandings. First of all, it must be explained that holy initiation or true spiritual awakening is not the beginning of one's spiritual journey back to their true home, meaning back to the highest kingdom of God, Supreme Lord, Supreme Consciousness, or higher truth, etc. But instead, it marks the beginning of the end of that search for the highest truth and bliss. You see, once initiated by a true Holy Master, as opposed to other forms of discipleship encounters, one's long-awaited search, life after life, for true liberation from the endless cycle of birth and deaths, and one's struggles and dramas of illusory existence, or one's high truth seeking journey, has finally come to an end. Therefore, holy initiation by a perfect living master, as opposed to others, is a very special and rare event, that completes one's seeking journey for eternal peace, happiness, and true identity. It offers a guarantee of success that comes from the highest authority, whether quickly or gradually, according to the level of readiness or attachments that one has in this world. These attachments include everything from the pride of one's own imposter ego to that of one's possessions, obsessions, family, friends, or pets, etc. Now, holy initiation itself is simply a method of formally accepting a sincere truth seeker onto the high path to soul liberation, as opposed to the simple mind or character liberation that is the most common norm in religion, psychology, or philosophy today. Unknown to the latter belief systems is the fact that one's soul is a separate entity to the mind tool or illusory character that most people, veiled by the darkness of ignorance, associate with themselves, and so requires a different approach for its liberation from karmic existence. The soul is one's true and everlasting identity, not the temporary mind form that one associates with today. As a mere thinking and imagination tool, the poor mind doesn't comprehend all this, and so creates or adopts its own imaginary path to liberation or enlightenment, based upon the mere knowledge of concepts and their imaginary or abstract world vision, which it then manifests as visions, experiences, and dramas. Sadly for humanity, yet offered without the intention of deception, I would say, this habit of the higher mind is translated into scripture and then taught to others in this manner, in the hope of finding true peace and happiness this way. Is the old proverb of the blind leading the blind to a stark disappointment in the end. Some call this misguided way the work of the negative power or Kal, masquerading as the hero, or a holy visitor, high intellectual, or demigod, in the great illusion of worldly existence, or as a cruel play by the negative power. But whichever way one looks at it, still this misguided method has become the majority way in the human world for now. In contrast to all this, when a holy master accepts a marked soul for holy initiation, that master places within the subconscious awareness of the disciple his or her telepathic or radiant form, which the disciple can then communicate with directly, intuitively at first, but then more fully later on, through spiritual practice, without ever needing to see the physical master, in the physical form, let's say, ever again. Also, it must be further explained concerning the need for a true holy master, that although one can connect in concept with the abstract form of the true Lord in their mind, such a connection cannot be developed any further to the point of true liberation, as it is generated by the illusory mind. Therefore, the true Lord has to manifest a representative of its high truth self into human form, in disguise actually, simply to avoid unwanted attention from the insincere, unready masses that would only hinder their sacred work. In this way, this human form of a holy master, etc., looks like any other man or woman on the outside, and even carries a karmic body filled with dramas, health issues, and difficulties, just like other human beings, which they admirably overcome in a practical and wise manner, as demonstration to others of how to deal with karmic or worldly issues. Furthermore, since the habit of human beings is to follow someone who can help them in some way, whether they be a parent, teacher, guru, or role model, then this habit is also utilized by a holy master to ferry one across the ocean of worldly phenomena to the safe shore of true liberation, via the bond of love and trust. So for this to work, however, sincere trust and faith in that master is needed, through the pull of love and devotion. hence the creation of the path of bhakti or devotional santmat, that historically and today exists alongside the more familiar mindfulness paths of religion, science, and philosophy. Now, during this devotional, truth-seeking journey, the disciple is pulled along by the power of inner truth-seeking and a deep, unexplainable love for that high truth that cannot be undone by the mere mind. Therefore, in time, this devotion, trust, and faith becomes ever stronger through direct inner and outer experiences, to the point of complete surrender. Yet this marvel of unimagined surrender is only possible through the grace and marvel of a true holy master, where mere association with them in time transforms a lowly human animal into an upright, noble human being, as demonstrated by one's change in attitude towards true saintliness. Now, before that sacred time of holy initiation comes, a non-initiate is in a constant turmoil of change and impermanence, wandering endlessly and blindly through life after life, being tossed about by the karmic circumstances from one mode of suffering or delusion of happiness to the next, without any lasting resolution or peace. Indeed, whether one remembers one's past or not, their present existence in the human form is just one chapter of countless chapters that have already passed in the great script of their soul's journey through creation experience. You see, apart from the initial excitement of one's daring adventure into alternative forms of existence in creation, since leaving one's true home and identity, the simple high truth is that each past life has been lived and served simply to bring about a much-awaited final end to one's endless wanderings, through the process of holy initiation and spiritual practice, by which one is finally set onto the path to true liberation as a true disciple of their own high truth. Therefore, this holy path of true santmat differs from one's mindfulness journey through religion or philosophy, in that it actually allows one to permanently and joyfully leave the realm of the imposter mind or character world that one has identified with for so many lifetimes, to finally know for sure one's true glory and greatness, and of one's true home once again. There is nothing else like this journey, this final journey, for any soul in creation, whether they are currently playing the part of a simple human being, a learned saint, or a high-ranking demigod or deity. All are trapped in karmic delusion, that is in constant flux. Hence, even Lord Krishna, when asked about the truth of cyclic existence, told his close friend Uddhava about this high truth as they were walking along the dirt road back to their home. Krishna revealed a great secret to Uddhava in answer to this puzzle of karmic existence. He honestly said this: "Look at this little ant before us. See how it scurries in fear and restlessness now. Yet this same ant was once a mighty Brahma, Lord of creation himself, in times long past. For such is the impermanence of karmic existence. Therefore, Uddhava, my faithful friend, you must transcend even me if you are to be truly liberated." Now this is a great revelation spoken by Lord Krishna himself of the Hindu faith, while Jesus the Christ of Christianity reported a similar fact. He famously replied, when his close disciple asked, "What shall we do, Master, when you are gone?" by saying, "Whatever I have done, ye can do better. So seek the high truth, and that truth shall set you free." Similarly, all true saints of Santmat heartily proclaim that true happiness or liberation can only be gained through surrendering one's jiva or I, the imposter ego or character, to the true Lord of all, or that true Lord's representative here on earth. The fact is that only a fully enlightened one can enlighten another, just like only a lit candle can light other candles, even in the darkest of rooms. Thus, this enlightenment means dispelling the darkness of ignorance of one's true existence and revealing the light of truth to the one who is ready for salvation, no matter whether the mind is aware of this state of the soul or not. You see, this highest path to truth is acausal, meaning it does not involve the thinking or emotional mind in its process. Only a soul-to-soul connection is involved, meaning supersoul or God to individual soul or seeking human being. The mighty ocean calls the wandering wave back to itself once it has served its purpose, thus becoming the mighty ocean itself once again. What's more, only the human form has been allocated the privilege of returning back to its true home and identity in this creation. No other form in creation has this privilege, no matter how powerful or glorious they may appear to be from the human perspective. This indeed is the true and verifiable testimony of the true saints and the truly enlightened ones, who dwell amongst us in perfect disguise, only revealing themselves to those who are ready. The true followers of the holy masters, perfect saints and noble mystics of our time, not simply the curious-minded, are known as holy truth disciples or Sant disciples, while many other belief systems have captured this idea, in name only, to promote their divisive cause, in a hopeful but misguided relationship with the high truth path. True discipleship, therefore, involves three basic principles that resoundingly distinguishes it from other paths, which are: number 1, seek the real truth of all existence within the true temple of the human form, no matter what the circumstances of one's karmic life, while living a simple householder life. No need to run away to the hills, caves, or temples, or punish oneself with harsh austerities. Number 2, do no intentional harm, either to oneself or to others, nor to the planet that serves us, for what goes around comes around, as per the natural law. Instead, find another way, or simply avoid the harmful activity. Indeed, all so-called rights and wrongs, goods and bads, or causes and consequences is covered by this one karmic moral law of nature. Number 3, do not judge or condemn anyone or anything that happens in this illusion of existence, for all is within the law of karma or the play of the Lord, and of none other. Nothing befalls one in this world that has not been first initiated by the so-called victim itself, either in this lifetime or in times long past, which only the true Lord, Holy Master, or through holy meditation can reveal. Indeed, if one can follow with earnest sincerity these three noble ways of living, then such a one, even if they should fall or fail many times, is assured of the Lord's grace at the time of death, as well as during one's mortal life. So that ends this brief introduction. Let's now return to the question and answer session for the remainder of this talk.
Thank you. The theme for these questions again are initiation and discipleship. The first set of questions are around discipleship. First two questions, aim of being a disciple. What is the main aim of being a disciple? It appears you become a disciple by default due to being initiated by a perfect living master.
Well, I've just listed the 3 aims of being a disciple, but the 3 noble ways of living. But I remind again, the point of being a disciple of the high truth, as opposed to being a disciple of many other followings, is that one should become perfect, like their role model, master, holy master. The master represents how one should live and behave in this world, and how one should practice their spiritual or truth-seeking journey. So really, by following the dictates of the master, the example and the demonstration by a holy master, that is the way of being a disciple. We should try as best as we can to follow this, despite our karmic circumstances. And should we fail, then we should pick ourselves up, brush off the dust and move on. Never look back. Never look back at what has failed. Always look forward. Because if we look back, then we halt our progress. We bring the past into the present and we cannot move any further. We dwell in the past. How can anybody dwelling in the past move forward? It's like putting the car in reverse and hoping to go forward. It doesn't happen. So that is what a true disciple should be doing. They should be similarly tenderly and gracefully detaching themselves from worldly phenomena as much as they can, by giving up certain things that are not good for their well-being of mind and soul. So all of these things are explained in detail in many of the books and so on, so I won't go into it, because this itself is an entire satsang of how one should behave in given circumstances. But the general idea is, do no harm, seek the high truth, and do not judge or condemn anything, but seek to understand instead. So if we can follow these simple principles, then that is a good disciple, because that's exactly what the master wants. But this is only possible if one embraces wholeheartedly spiritual practice, because the mind itself won't just readily adopt these ideas. It needs to be trained. Like anybody, needs to be trained to become a habit, so when we are trained in the right habits, the mind automatically goes along with it, because it takes the credit for it. See, the one weakness of the mind is that you can actually make it seem like the mind is getting the credit for something that the Lord is doing. It's a clever way to win over the ego mind, by giving the mind the credit. Yes, you're a very good disciple, you've done very well. You see, the master will praise the disciple. But of course, in reality, the disciple is doing nothing. It's all part of the evolution process of their script, and the master is behind that. But if you give the disciple credit, then the disciple says, yes, I will do more. You see, so masters are very clever in their methods of how to utilize the nature of the mind to win over. So it looks like the mind is getting all the credit. So when the path has been laid out in times past and even today, the idea is these are things that the mind can do. For example, being a noble human being, or do no harm. This is something you can do. Be kind, be forgiving. The mind understands these things. It can try to do it. And when it achieves these things through one means or another, it pats itself on the back and says, look how good I am. The only trouble with that is that there is a point at which the mind has to cross its own arrogance. Because when the spiritual mind is evolved, these people become highly arrogant. They think that's it. We have become wise. You should listen to us or be doomed, right? And then they judge. They do the very thing that they are set out not to do, but they do it in a very clever way, because they think that they're being good and noble. So they justify this justice by saying, well, I'm doing it in the good way. What is right and wrong? I'm using the moral code that we have adopted by the mind to say that this is right and that's wrong, and therefore I'm judging by that. What harm is there in this? But of course there's great harm, because they don't understand what they're doing. They're deluded. So spiritual arrogance is a real problem, and you tend to find this in some spiritual teachers. So these are not good examples, but you do not find this in holy masters, for they are always humble, they are always kind, forgiving. They never show judgment. They never curse or say anything bad about anybody or anything. They always try to give an explanation of why these things happen, which sometimes lands them into trouble by the masses, because when they do this, then they will say, oh, you're not in tune with us, we have these feelings and these passions and emotions, and you're talking about things which are unacceptable to us right now. So then the masters can be crucified, burnt alive, or stoned, or all manner of things, because they say something that's contrary to public opinion. But because they represent the truth, they say, okay, so be it.
Because you mentioned, don't judge, and I think we
Yes.
spoke about this last month, because it is quite challenging, because people are going to do things that you don't necessarily think are right, and you believe are right.
Yes.
So it feels as if you're just allowing them to do that. Or
No, the viewpoint of what you consider to be right and wrong is based upon insufficient evidence and fact. For example, if you were to do your spiritual practice and go within and you see the entire scheme of creation being planned out, you'll understand firstly of two things. One, the entire scheme is an illusion, it's just a play, so there's no reality. But the second thing is that anything that happens to anyone is because they have already initiated this in past times, which they've forgotten about. So when you go to somebody's past subconscious memories, going back millions and millions of births, you will see everything is laid out there. And therefore, they're just reaping the consequences of the past. But because there's such a large gap of time, from even lifetime to lifetime, going back even 100 lifetimes. There was a famous story at the time of Krishna. The king of that time, Drishta, he was born blind. But because of his spiritual practice at the time, he could go back almost 100 lifetimes of his karmic existences. And he could not see anything that made him born blind, that he had done. So he asked Lord Krishna, please help me in this. I have gone back 100 lifetimes through this spiritual practice, but I cannot see anything that would make me be born blind in this life. Then Krishna told him, go back a little further. He empowered him with the ability for a moment to see to the 102 lifetimes. He said, 102 lifetimes you blinded some insect with a magnifying glass. He said, now you're paying the price of that. For every grain of sand must be accounted for. Every grain. Nothing must be missed. Karma is absolute justice. Yeah. And so he understood now why he was born blind. But that is the extent by which karma affects us. So when we're experiencing something, we think we're above all this. We think, oh, well, in this lifetime, I'm such a good soul. I'm such a noble one. But because they do not understand how they got here, what roots they got here with, what manner of lives they have lived in the past, they assume they're born innocent because they have no memory. Imagine if you have memory, you would think you're innocent of everything, but you're not. Everything within the karmic realm is based upon the law of cause and consequence. Therefore, there's a rhyme and a reason. But one shouldn't lose heart that suffering is mere punishment. It's not. It's also learning. There's two ways of looking at suffering. You can either become miserable about it and curse and condemn it, which means it served no purpose for you. It's just miserable. But what if instead you seek to understand a hidden message behind it? Because although you are undergoing specific forms of suffering, there is a deeper message behind this. And that message is usually in line with something that's deep in your heart to achieve. So for example, if you're a true spiritual practitioner and you want to know the truth, then certain realities you must face. You must face the illusion for what it is, so you can detach from that illusion. Suffering is a great way of putting the axe down and chopping you and cutting the roots that bind you to attachment. It works really well. Words do not have the same effect. Words temporarily make you feel good, but it's nothing like a good dose of suffering to get you going, you see. So masters allow this to happen. When somebody protests, but master, I'm suffering. Why am I suffering? You initiated me. Well, because that serves two purposes. Yes, paying back karma, clearing the account for an initiate, which is different from a non-initiate. So they suffer a little bit more because they have to clear their karmic account. But on top of that, there's a learning as well, that this particular story of yours has to go in a particular direction. It's a guide. So don't go there like others. Don't follow what others are doing, because that's not for you. This way is for you, right? So when you personally seek to understand the role of suffering, it becomes a great teacher. the greatest of teachers, in fact. And that's why masters say, do not pray for an end to your suffering. Do not seek them, but seek instead to rise above it and to understand it. You see, that's why even Babaji seems sometimes quite heartless in answer to people's queries. He said, well, this is just your karma, you just have to go through it. He said, go through it with balance and poise through spiritual practice. By meditating and rising the consciousness above it, you won't feel it so much. You may even get to a point where you don't feel it at all. You know, but still you have to go through it because you're part of the play. And everybody has their role to play. You can't suddenly change the role midway and decide, I don't like this anymore, I'm walking off the stage. Imagine the movie, how the movie would pan out if that happened. So once you've signed the script, once you've come in, you have to play the game. The difference is where your attention lies. If your attention is fixated on something higher, then naturally you don't even notice what's going on here. You hardly notice it. You know that when we're daydreaming or sometimes we're just lost in thought and somebody's going on around and said, oh, what happened? What happened? And everybody said, didn't you see that? That happened? I said, no. But you were standing there. I said, yes, but my mind was somewhere else. That is the closest thing that we can relate to as an example of somebody who's in the spiritual mode of existence, where their attention is on a higher thing. So they don't notice the dukkha, the suffering that's happening all around them. And when others point it out, they say, oh, okay. What they're going to say? You know, because they're lost in this high thing. So the idea of spiritual practice and meditation, which Babaji keeps going on about, Ishwarji and all the masters, they talk about this meditation, is to raise the attention beyond the lower forms of emotional existence and intellectual existence to spiritual ways of looking at things. And the other thing it does, it attaches ourselves to the beloved. So this is a reason why we need a focus of attention. An abstract form can't do this. If you imagine a form of a god or a master, it can't be done. But when you're initiated by somebody you've actually met and you have a connection with, then you can focus upon that one. And that immediately distracts you. Because when you're focused on something, it stops you seeing anything else. So even through most difficult times, yes.
You know, if somebody was in deep meditation and then in the high levels, in the illusion, your role as the character, does that continue?
Yes.
To everybody else in the...
But you don't mind it so much. As you raise above, you don't mind what the character is doing, whether it's placed here or there, whether it's on its head or on its feet.
No, what I'm saying is, the other characters in the illusion, do they still see you like going to work and...
Yes.
But you're in the higher...
Yes. Well, Master is an example of that. They're fully enlightened, yet they live normal human lives. They live about like you and I. You can't tell. It's only when you go within and you see them in the higher form of existence, you understand who they really are. And then you get stunned. So the first thing that happens when you see the inner form of the Master, the radiant form, the spiritual form, is you look at them physically in great admiration, how clever their disguise. No one knows the secret of that individual sitting before them. He is such a good actor at playing the role of a man or a woman, playing the part, going about it, yes, being wise, answering a few questions, but nobody knows the secret. You see? And that is the marvel and wonder of it. You have 1,000 Sangats sitting there, and they don't know who they're sitting in front of. They have all ideas in their mind, generated by the mind's vision. Oh, this one is this, maybe he can help me with my job, maybe my son could get married, maybe my health can improve. They go for all these reasons, but they don't understand who and what is sitting in front of them. And if they ask for the right thing, they can get everything. They can get the entirety. There was a very, very famous story which I have told before, but I'll tell again, to understand about the difference of a master and as opposed to an ordinary individual giving knowledge. At the time, in times past in India, there was a great king called King Janak. Many stories are told about him. This is one of them. And it was his birthday. And he wanted to celebrate his birthday in a grand way because he was a very successful king, much loved by his people, because he was really honest and heartfelt as a ruler, fair, just, and so on. So, because his people rewarded him with great wealth and great productivity of the lands, they all worked diligently and hard, he decided that he wanted to give something back to the people. Now, the way he did this was he arranged a big mela. And for those who don't know what mela is, it's like a fair, right? A fair in which there was entertainment going on, but also he added this one fact. He said that he's going to open up his main palace, right? And everybody can walk in there. And whatever they want, they can take one object back with them. Whatever they wanted, whatever they see, they can take it. Everything in that palace is up for grabs. Of course, this really excited the population. Wow, the king's riches is legendary. You know, what is in there that we can take? So after the entertainments and everything, then the big doors opened and the people rushed in. And the king was by the door with his ministers greeting the people and say, go, take what you want, but only take one thing so that everybody gets a share. And so they went about and everybody was looking at this and grabbing what they can, you know. And then this young lady walked in. And she was hesitantly walking in and looking around, looking everywhere, but not touching anything, not taking anything. And she just looked around and just marveled at it all. And the king noticed this because she was so poised and elegant in her manner, in the way she just walked in and didn't seem to be excited like the crowd. And so he felt compelled to approach her. So he told his minister to call her over. Because she'd been wandering now for about half an hour and not taking anything. So the minister called her over to the king's attention, and the king introduced himself. And he said, I am puzzled by you. And she said, oh Lord, what is it you're puzzled about? He said, is there nothing you like here? He said, oh yes, I like everything here. He said, but you've not touched or taken a single thing. He said, yes. He said, is there not anything that I can give you? He said, after all, I have said in public statement that everything that is in this palace you can have. Yeah, and the ministers are my witness. She said, well, there is one thing I want. If you're so sure about your statement. He said, yes, anything, ask. She said, I want you. And the king realized that he could not back down at what he had made as a public statement. So he had to marry her. And then he asked her, you have chosen me. What made you take that bold decision? He said, well, these people are happy with the tinsels and trashes of little small objects. I want everything. And if I marry you, the entire palace and everything else becomes mine. And the king admired her boldness. And because he was a spiritual seeker himself, seeking the ultimate truth, and he was known for this, he understood what she meant. And he took her as his wife, very famous wife. And they served together the kingdom and so on. But, you see, this is the plight of individuals here. Either they want some small little trinkets and stuff from the world, or they want everything. So when we sit before a master, we have two options. We could ask for our petty needs, or we could say, I simply want you, and everything that comes with it.
Yeah, it's like asking for the creation and not the creator, isn't it? Or
Yeah, it's people do not understand, and that's because of the nature of the mind. They don't know what to ask for, so they ask for the lesser things, and in time they get it granted. Mostly everything you ask for, whether in this lifetime or the next, will be granted. Believe me. So be careful what you ask, which is what Babaji always says as well. Because although you might not think that what you're asking for in full heart is granted to you, that you have been let down, it's only because there's a whole stack of karmas to come first. And if they grant you that thing, that will take to change the script, but they cannot change the script because then the whole chaos will come. But it's stored. So in times gone past, in the future, that will come about, and you will be granted that thing. And you will then have to live that life, and all the consequences that go with it. Everything is granted. But if you should ask for the Lord itself in an earnest and sincere way, it may not be granted there and then. as some of the books tell you of the master putting his hand on the head and the person being liberated. No, these are just stories. Because karma has to be fulfilled. Your life has to be fulfilled. The difference is it takes a turn. It takes a change in direction. But very few people ask for this sincerely. Most people are preoccupied with solving their problems. A master happily gives them what they want because he's a benevolent giver. If they ask for something small, he gives them $1. But he has a gold bar in his pocket to give as well. But if somebody says, give me the gold bar, of which you make your $1, he said, give me the entire bar. He said, okay, you asked it, I'll give it. But nobody dare ask. They said, just give me $1. And that's the nature of individuals. So the masters laugh. This is the whole part of the illusion, that the minds are programmed for small little things. Because you have to remember that the history of our progression from the lower species to the higher species meant that we came from the lowly ant level up to the human being, crossing all the various species to get to the human form. So you imagine what our mind state is. What does an ant require? A simple morsel of food, some sugar, and a place to stay. That's it. It's a very humble existence. We carry those past ideas and feelings with us into the human form. So that's why we're born as a human animal. And to become a human being, a noble human being, we have to raise the bar a bit. We have to not think like the animals of our survival, but we have to set something beyond survival, where survival doesn't count anymore even. You don't even think about eating or drinking or clothing, nothing. You only want the truth. And that is something completely alien to all other life forms. Everyone is in the game of survival. Give me something I need to survive this day. I don't care about the future. Just give me something now.
The confusing part there is like you're saying that if somebody was to meditate and
Yeah.
go inside
Yeah.
and they're in the higher realms,
Yes.
their character continues.
Yes.
Yeah, so the character will continue going to work and do whatever.
Yes, their duties, the dharma has to continue. The difference is their attitude changes completely. They become saintly in attitude.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like the example of Great Master, when he meditated, he still went to work.
Yes.
Not
That's right.
His character went to work, although he was in the inner realms.
Yes.
So the people at work still saw him at work.
Yes. That's I'm saying the same. The difference is the attitude is different. So when Great Master became fully enlightened, he had all the knowledge and greatness of a master, but he still fulfilled his duties. So that everybody saw him going to work.
What he means is, I think,
If he
he's
doesn't-
still sitting there, yet people saw him.
Yeah, if-
going
No,
to
you're thinking of it as a physical.
Yeah.
No, this is not physical. You are multifaceted. You have multi-dimensions. You exist physically, you exist astrally, you exist causally, and you exist as a soul. And each one of these exists in separateness. The mere fact that your attention is placed on your physical, it doesn't mean that the astral form can't be enjoying higher experiences, or the causal form can't be enjoying higher experiences. The physical is still going about its duty.
Yeah, so
It doesn't affect.
That's what I mean. So if somebody was in their bedroom meditating,
Yes,
and they're meditating for weeks on end,
yes,
their character continues.
yes. It's a separate thing.
So then what is the issue then if the master pulls you inside? The character is going to continue.
Yes, but the characters have no importance. The character is just a means
Yeah, but
to fulfill the karmic existence here. But the real identity is the soul. So therefore, the idea is to get in contact with the soul, your true self. And it doesn't matter what the others are doing. Whether it's the physical character, the astral character, there's no reality to anything that's going on. And you're rising above in awareness through these various realities, despite them going about their business as scripted by the Lord. The script cannot change.
that's what the part I don't understand, because you're saying that we can't disrupt the role of the character.
You know, you can't
'Cause
disrupt it.
you'll affect the whole
That's right.
system.
That's right.
Yeah, but on one hand, you're saying that if you're in your room and you meditate and the master pulls you inside and you're due at work the next day, your character will still go to work.
Yes.
But so what?
It's
does it
not
matter?
you. You're assuming you're one entity. This is the problem of understanding. You only see yourself as a physical. So you think only the physical exists. Therefore, if I'm physically meditating and I'm in the higher realms as a spiritual being, Therefore, I can't be physically at a place. But yeah, sure, if your physical body is sitting there, you can't be at work. But meditation is not about that. Meditation is about connecting with your higher self, your radiant form within, whilst you're going to work. So let's say you've meditated, you've got up with the alarm, and then you go to work. You're physically at work, but your attention can be higher up.
Yeah, but that's not what the story, the Great Master story is saying in the books. It's saying that he was actually sitting there meditating. He forgot to go to work.
Yes, that's a difference. That's a story. That's a different thing. It is possible, yes.
That's the question.
Now that's something else completely.
So
that's a
possible,
grace.
If that's possible,
yes, it is.
Then it doesn't matter if the master pulls us inside, the character is going to continue.
Yes, if necessary. Not in all cases. Like Baba Jamail Singh, for example, meditated for 12 days after initiation, and he was gone physically, but he was still there, sitting in his room, within the room. Right? He was in meditation, and they found him there. They didn't know where he was because he was nowhere in the physical world. This is just an example of the grace of the Lord for a particular individual. That the Lord's power is such that he can cover your duties because you're doing bhakti towards him. Not because this is something that should be done or looked for or practiced. It's just an example of the power and grace of the Lord. And it's a completely different thing.
So that's rare.
It's very rare. And it rarely happens. But it's not what should be happening. Because there is also equal examples of, like Guru Nanak and Baba Jamail Singh, for example, who disappeared. And they were not seen physically or in any form. So it's not, you can, which way? It's a story. It's an example. What are stories told about? They give us an example of what can be done. Not what is to be done. Yeah, so don't worry about that. But should you ever get to that point of true bhakti where you're sitting in meditation all day long and then the Lord manifests himself in your workplace, then please let us know.
Yeah, but he does say, if you do my work, I'll do your work.
Yes, but that's a different story. You see, again, these are mistranslated. What that means is, if you spend your time in spiritual practice and devotions, then the worldly responsibilities and everything will be taken care of automatically without you having to make too much effort. What that means is you still have to turn up and be there and say, but it just works out. Everything is smoothed out. Everything just happens.
Yeah,
even when a problem
He
comes.
was in the army and
Yes.
he didn't attend,
Yes,
and yet they said you were here.
that's right. I'll just give an example of, I've
But he
explained
said
why
it
that
wasn't.
is.
Yeah,
No, that's true.
Yeah.
And that's not the only time it's happened. It's happened even to disciples.
that's what I mean.
But this is an example, not the norm. This is done for a particular reason. It's not something that we look to. This is not something we do. Because there's also equal number of examples
Good
of this.
example.
Yeah, but this is a small thing. A very, very small thing. This is not the point of spiritual practice. It doesn't lead to liberation. This is just an impressive magic show. What of it? What gained from that? The spiritual practice itself is the goal, to actually connect with the higher truth, not the little miracles that happen here or there. They're of no consequence. What we are seeking is the very highest truth of ourself, not the magic of the world. Yeah?
No, it's not magic, but he said he wasn't there and...
No, I'm explaining to you that these things are not really relevant in spiritual practice. They are for a specific individual, and they don't carry any meaning. If you then develop that conversation with Great Master, say, so, what of this? He said, this was just a personal confirmation for me that the Masters will cover you even when you are absent. That's all he'll say. But if you ask him, was there any merit in spiritual gain? He'll say, no. There's no gain. Even yogis can do riddhi siddhyas. They have the ability to get yogic powers and do things. It doesn't take them any closer to the truth. So these things are done as examples. And masters often do many miracles, little things happen as an example of what can be done, but not what we should be seeking. Because anything that happens in the illusion remains an illusion. It is part of the illusory world. The high path of Sant Marg is about soul realization, soul liberation from all these doings. Going to work is a doing. When you go to Satgurus, there's no doings. There's nothing to be done. It is perfect stillness. It is perfect peace. It is perfect bliss. There's nothing to be done, nothing to achieve. So how can anything that happens in this illusory world even relate to such a high state? There's no relationship whatsoever. So these are just for the mind. Like you get excited by such things. A more evolved person may say, oh, it's just a story of an example. I get it. I get the meaning. It doesn't matter. It depends on, all these little things are there to help you develop your own understanding from the lower to a higher state. So some like myself is here to explain these things so you don't take it too literally or too seriously. And so yes, in answer to your question, it is perfectly possible for you to be in two places at once if the master so wishes it, but it's also nothing to do with spirituality in the sense it does not help you in any other way other than the fact that it's a demonstration to you of the master's power and possibility, but not the norm. So if you want to do this, meditate all day and all night and not go to work, let me know how it goes for you. Because there are an equal number of examples of people who've done exactly that and they were missed. But they got away with it. They were forgiven. They said, oh, okay, there's that change of heart of the boss. Oh, okay, no problem. They suddenly become very gracious. Where does that come from? They're not punished. That is a miracle too, but that's not as impressive as if you were duplicated, isn't it? So we have our own understanding of what's impressive. Yes? Yeah. To me, it's all impressive. It's all the magnificence of the divine, whether he does it this way or that way. It doesn't matter. But the real objective is not these things. The real objective is to connect with your own high truth identity in its purest form, the soul form, and the wonder and marvel and joy of that, which the mind cannot comprehend. So it looks at these smaller things. So Great Master, when he was on his journey, went through everything. He went through all the difficulties you go through initially. The difference is he did it rather quickly in one lifetime. So he was able to attain this very high state within a lifetime because he had already done all the past hard work. Over many lifetimes he'd already been on a journey. He was a monk, he was many things. Then eventually he got onto the path and he was elevated to that status. That's why masters who know their past journey and what they've been through do not accept any admiration or worship of their being, because they know that they have done nothing differently to you. The difference is you're somewhere along the road. If you're going between here and India, Delhi, yeah, and you're somewhere along the road and they're a bit further, so what? You're on the road. Yeah, it's a matter of time before you get there. So how can a master really stand and say, I'm better than you? Because I've already got there. And you started a bit later, but you're going to guarantee to get there. So what's the difference between you and them? So this is why masters are humble, because they understand that people are on their journey. And all it is, they help them along the way, selflessly. They guide them. And they're also entertained and amused by the ways of the disciples, the thinking and the twists and turns that they try to do in this journey, when it's actually so simple. How they make it complicated. How they use their imagination to imagine all things. So whatever a master says, it can be interpreted in many ways because words are limited. Whereas in the higher realms where telepathy is used, telepathy involves more than just words or sounds. It involves feelings that make it 3D. It's a difference between 2D and 3D imagery, let's say. In fact, it's more than 3D. But it conveys so much that mere words alone cannot. So that's why masters often say, go within and ask those questions and you'll find the truth. Go within and you'll find the truth. Why don't they just tell us now? Look, I'm attempting to tell you and it's not getting through so well. So you can see how difficult words are. But if telepathically we were to meet and I could demonstrate the same thing to you through a telepathic meet, your understanding will be complete. So it's a limitation of language, a limitation of expression. And this is what masters have to deal with all the time when they're giving explanations. Because whatever they say will be taken out of context. Because the nature of the mind is to twist and turn everything. It doesn't like straight lines. They like to go around the merry-go-round. That's the way of the mind. It's a very strange thing to watch. How people go about things. That's why when Balthusai was asked, how easy is it to gain the inner knowledge. And he was working in the garden at that time. And he said, like this, and he picked up a plant from one place and put it into the other. That's it? He said, yes, that's it. So in principle, it's very simple, but the mind likes to make things complicated. And the complication of the mind is what causes all these debates. This way and that way, but all debates are of the mind. Why not just go within, meditate and do the spiritual practice and see for yourself? When you see for yourself innerly, it's with the telepathic power, then there's no misunderstanding. Then you straight say, I know. But then you also know you can't tell your neighbours, because they'll be having 101 questions. But this and but that. And there's no but this and but that, but there is in their mind. So masters patiently sit there. Look at poor Babaji. He every week has to churn out a video answering these questions, which he's done 100 times. Now really, if the person was in a state of readiness, he would only need to answer the question once, that similar question. He would never need to repeat the same thing, because there's as many people, there are as many answers. There's many variations of the theme. If you have 100 people asking the same question, Master will have to answer to each and every one individually, because they have 100 different ways of interpreting. But still, Master patiently and tolerantly puts up with it, and he keeps on answering their questions. And what he's done now is resort to more psychology and philosophy to answer their questions, because realizing that for many, the spiritual path is just too much for them. That if he says in a very spiritual way, or higher spiritual truth, they will not understand or accept it in the modern world, because the mind is so influenced by so many worldly things. So he keeps it now to a psychological answer, which for most people fits. If he answers their question in a way that they can understand, dumbing it down, so to speak, to the lower level, they say, okay, I can do this one little step. But luckily, for the disciples of a perfect living master, it is not dependent upon them. Because if it was dependent upon the mind, no one would succeed on this journey. What happens at the time of initiation when the master places himself within you is also he has awakened the spiritual side of the soul in Parbrahm, in the third realm. The soul now is waking from its slumber, its sleepness. Because whilst the mind tool is being active, the soul has to dumb itself down a little bit to allow the mind tool to take on the character role. But now that the soul is being awakened, slowly the mind is being weakened and the soul or wisdom or intuitive is becoming stronger. So what you will see, and this is a real remarkable truth of it, and you can ask anybody who's become enlightened to this point, in Parbrahm, the master is there. The master soul is pulling each and every individual just at the right pace that it can cope with. Some are being pulled fast, some are being pulled slow. And he gives them the credit for the spiritual work. In other words, he puts a pat on the back, well done. Your meditation has yielded results. This has happened, this has happened. But actually, he's doing all the pulling. They think they're pushing their way up. They're not. They're being pulled. And this pulling means, and this is demonstrated by the life of a disciple, as they improve and progress, they think, actually, I've got so many changes in myself which I cannot account for of my own doing. I've not attended a course. Everybody wants to attend a course and everything these days. A course to update my skill set. I seem to be naturally more kind, more tolerant, more this, more that. All these saintly qualities, but I cannot truly account for this. I can't think of anything I've done in particular that merits this. You see? Even the meditation. They may be lousy in meditation, they're just sitting. But that doesn't account for their change. So this is a very personal experience, let's say, that one recognizes within themselves as their own spiritual progress. Because this is a pull from the Lord, not a pushing of you. By what power do you have to push such a heavy load off your shoulders? You can't. But the Lord has the power to pull everything away from you. All the attachments, all the difficulties, everything, as you make spiritual progress. And the amount of spiritual progress you make is determined by your sanskars, your ability to do spiritual practice. So for some people, they have a very sincere heart. very deeply sincere. They naturally fall into it. So these ones can be pulled a little faster. So they appear to suffer more even. And it's true. A lot of satsangis say that since they're initiated, they've suffered more. And it's absolutely true. This is because they can take it. Because on one hand, the master's now pulling them up, because they can't push as hard as the master can pull. Yeah. So when he's been pulled, yes, the journey's a little faster because we have to make up time. Remember, within 4 lifetimes, this has to be settled roughly. So they've been pulled, but at the same time, it's also been smooth for them. So although they're going through difficulties, it works out in the end. And they say, oh, that worked out all right in the end. Right? And they don't understand, it's all by grace. On one hand, they're going through this difficulty because they've been pulled a little bit faster than they could push. On the other hand, they've got a silken glove bottom to tenderly pat them as they're going along, so they don't feel it too much. And so where are you involved in all this? This is all grace. Master's working both ends, but he lets you, because the mind is a player. It likes to have fun. Why does he want to make the mind miserable? So he allows the mind to take the credit. Yes, I'm a good spiritual practitioner. I'm a noble human being. Look how this life has panned out for me. Look how good this is. Look how that. And the master just laughs. It's a bit humiliating. It's an illusion.
We do say, thank God that didn't happen. Or this
Yeah, we say all these things.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing to thank the Lord,
Yeah.
because the Lord wants to be appreciated. That's all he wants from you. Recognition. Nothing else. So, if we appreciate the Lord, then it's worthwhile, that little display. But if we don't, you say, oh God, that person, yeah, this person, that, and you start attributing it to somebody else or to all other things, then obviously you've not benefited for that. So you have to try another go. So karma is relentless until you learn. When you learn that the only doer is the Lord, then you start realizing, because your own experience says, well, actually, I haven't done anything to get this. And it's other people say, oh, we didn't get this, we didn't get that. How did you manage to get it, you lucky son of a gun? And he says, well, actually, you're right. I can't think of anything I've done in particular. All I did was maybe ask or look in that direction. You mean, is that all it takes? Simply placing the attention somewhere else? Yes, as Poulticide says, simply take the plant from this place and put it there. If we can simply place our attention on something higher, then all the rest will follow. Everything else will be taken care of. But from the worldly point of view, we're still having to attend things, do things, we still have to pull ourselves there, but we're no longer doing anything. Yeah? It looks like we're doing things. So because the script has already been written, which we must fulfill because we're part of a whole domino effect, we can't take anybody out of the domino thing, we have to play our part. But the difference is, it just seems to go well. It just seems to go without much effort on our part, yet we still get the results. And we immediately need to recognize that we're not putting the effort. And everybody says, oh, you must be working hard, you must be doing this, you must be such a good person. And you're thinking, actually, no, none of that is true. But you can't tell them directly. So you just thank the Lord, say, thank you, Lord. Because then you know for sure you're not doing this. You see, this gradual realization as you rise above, when you get away from the idea that you are everything, that you are centered or everything centers around you, right? When you realize there's a higher power at work, and it's been demonstrated in subtle ways at first and then increasingly so, then you start realizing who and what you really are. What is your part in all this? And this creates a bond of love between the giver, who's helping you out, and you. Now your attention is being turned towards the giver, the benevolent one. Now that one becomes the beloved one, and you become devoted to that beloved one, because it's helping you. And you know for sure. Your intuitive inner self, despite the protestations of the mind to say it's not possible, the inner self says, no, I don't care what the mind said. I know that this is not me doing this. I know that there's something at work here, at play here. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to explain it, but there's something. But when you're initiated by a perfect living master, you have a focus of that something. You say it's the master doing it. A person is not initiated, that God is doing it. Either way, they're looking in the right direction. Yeah? And if they're looking in that direction, they're surely going to end up benefiting. So, being a disciple is a gradually evolving phase of existence in which you slowly come to that understanding. At first the mind is fascinated by stories and ideas and things, but eventually your own personal experiences, your own personal encounters pull the attention higher. And as the attention becomes higher, your awareness and understanding increases naturally. And luckily, this is not in your hands, because you would not do it. How can somebody change their habit? They can't. They're born in a certain way. They would ultimately die the same way, were it not for grace. But this grace, this hand of grace, we do not see. So we take the credit. Oh, look how we've done well. We were born in very poor circumstances, now we're wealthy, for example. Oh, look at us, how great is us. So then we show off our flashy cars, our designer clothes, our grand palaces, without understanding that this is just karma, this is just part of play. And it could be a trap. You see, a honey trap, a sweet trap. There's two types of trap, misery and pleasure. Pleasure is also a trap. Yeah, both things trap you because they stop you seeking the truth. One is preoccupied by the misery of their miserable circumstances. The other one is enjoying the pleasures wholeheartedly, without a care in the world. Yeah, both are in a trap. Yeah, from the Lord's point of view, both is still a trap. From a human point of view, they prefer one trap to another. So they've even given the name of this trap called a honey trap. Yeah, a sweet trap, the Amrit. Yeah, that this is wow, this is like Amrit. Our life is so wonderful, everything's going well. But for how long? That's the question. This is a world of change and impermanence. Like the Buddha said, nothing lasts forever. The whole world is the constant flux of change. Believe me, you are going to get older day by day. Disease will come, disappointment will come, and death will come for sure. Right? Absolutely guaranteed. So, a wise person, knowing this, like the Buddha, he decided to seek the truth. He was living in a palace while times were good. He was a very rare individual. Well, during the good times of pleasure and every wonder he had at his disposal, he left it all and became a beggar to seek the truth. That is an extraordinary individual.
And Mirabai was so rich as well.
Mirabai, yes, she came from a high-ranking family, and she went to the cobbler saint Ravidas, who was, he was a low caste, because she was such a high caste Hindu princess, and she was following this saint. The whole family were against her, so she had to pretend that she was doing bhakti to Lord Krishna. So the Hindus think, oh, she was a great Krishna follower because she used to do the ceremony. But when she was in front of the murti in her home, she was actually thinking of her master. She was just sitting in front of the murti. But they said, oh, look, she's doing puja to Lord Krishna, right? So she was clever. She was, in order to survive, yes. So these are all examples of how the game is played, right? But our own individual journey is a real testimony. It's authentication for us. And there's no better authentication than self-authentication. You can read many stories, but nothing beats self-authentication, which is why the spiritual masters say, please just try connecting with the truth yourself. Do this meditation, do this spiritual practice, and see it for yourself. Don't believe us. See it for yourself, and then all will be revealed. Then you can go dancing in the street with us, like Bulleh Shah did with his father when he enlightened him. And I think we've exhausted our first question. We haven't got to the second question yet.
Okay, still keeping in with the aim of being a disciple.
Yes.
This question says, is the discipleship of today the same as the discipleship of when Christ or Buddha was alive, for example?
There are different types of discipleship, as I explained a little bit in the introduction. The disciple of a perfect living master, their objective is to rise above the character of the I and their identity as a human being in this lifetime, and to raise to the level of their soul, which is part of the divine, the drop of the divine ocean of Satnam. The disciples of, say, Christ or Buddha or religious leaders were different. It was about mindfulness. So they taught mindfulness, which is becoming a better person. It's all involved about becoming a better and noble human being for a better life, and even going to the heaven, going to this temporary heaven where you could enjoy the fruits of your hard work as a human being. but you remain the character. You remain the false identity that you've adopted. You do not leave the character. None of these speak about the truth of the self as such. They talk about you as you identify with yourself today, going to another place physically. Because you have to understand that the human scholars who wrote all this down, they didn't have inner vision. They didn't understand the multifaceted aspect of human existence. So they didn't understand that we have different forms, like an astral form, a causal form, and a soul form. So they took the human being to be the entirety of that person. So that's why, for example, in Christianity and Islam, they bury the dead and they wait for Judgment Day. And their belief is that the bodies will somehow miraculously rise from the dead physically and go into some higher plane somewhere. They actually believe this, even today. Christians believe that's why they bury the dead. In Hinduism, they had a little bit more higher understanding, so they cremated their ones, saying that the fire, Agni, will consume them, and it's the soul and mind, or the spiritual self, that goes higher up, not the physical. You see? And same with Buddhism. So they adopted that line. And in Sant, they said, we don't care whether you bury them, hang them, feed them to the fishes, or burn them, right? Because it's nothing to do with the body or the mind. So they say it doesn't matter about the manner of death. There's no ceremony for the death in Sant. You just dispose of the body how you will. The difference is that the practice talks about connecting with the soul. So they're not interested in the form. So discipleship of such a high path of Sant involving the soul does not involve ritualistic practices which are performed by the religions, which place great emphasis on these religious practices, that you have to then be scattered in a sacred river, the ashes, or you have to be buried in consecrated ground, or you have to go to pilgrimages. All these things are ritualistic, and they involve the identity of the character with the world, because they could not see past the character. So everything revolved around the character, even that they had to repent and be good and noble, because that person is a sinner, that person is a saint. They divided people into categories according to what they thought was the identity of the individual. Sant is so unique in that it dispenses with all of that and say, well, all of this is illusion, and you're just trapped. What's the difference between the honey trap and the miserable trap? It's still a trap. You're not free. You're not whole again. You're not complete. You're not great. So why not just get the hell out of here and escape the entire system? So the discipleship role of Sant is completely different to those of, say, Christians and Buddhists and so on. They all have their level, because everybody has to start somewhere. It doesn't mean that Christianity or Buddhism is entirely wrong. It's just a step in their journey of realization, because when disappointment comes in the end, then that person in the next lifetime is born with this dislike of ritual and ceremony, realizing that it just doesn't come to anything fruitful. They start seeing flaws in the system, so they seek something higher. So from life after life, through different journeys, people become more and more aware. It's a learning. They say sometimes going through creation is a learning. In some ways it is, because you're learning to evolve as an individual from a lower state to a higher state. So if somebody's at that level where they're following a religion and believing all these ceremonies, it's okay. That's what they're at. I mean, they might respond to higher thinking. If the opportunity arises, they should ask you, why are you so happy? Despite us following these religions, we are miserable with the world. The state of the world is this and that. So many bad things are happening. But yet you still keep smiling. Why? Say, well, I have another way of looking at it. And they might be interested in your method, and they might then take a shine to it. So their time has come in this lifetime to change their ways, so they can be happy like you, dancing in the street, even when the whole world is in a mess. So yes, the discipleship is different, and it's got nothing to do with the past or the present. It's to do with the system of discipleship and what the objectives of that discipleship is.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions regarding the duty as a disciple. What should we do most importantly on a daily basis to fulfill our duty as a disciple?
There's one objective: seek the truth. Everything else shall follow. If you place the truth, no matter what the cost, as your single objective in everything you do, everything else shall follow. all the information you need to fulfill that will come your way. All the right people will come your way. Everything will come your way.
Is the duty of a disciple different for Sant versus Christianity, for
Yes,
example?
I'll give you an example. Because one is working in mindfulness realms of the character, and the other one wants to get the complete hell out of it all and become true and whole again.
Okay, I've got a question about principle. What is the highest noble principle for a disciple? Standing up for the truth at all times, or the do no harm principle, if these are the only two options?
If they're the only two options, then I'll say do no harm naturally.
Okay.
Because in truth, you can harm another by telling the truth. If you see somebody walking down the street and they, in your opinion, look ugly, and you go up to them and say, I'm a truthful person, I always speak the truth, and you're pig ugly. I just thought I'd let you know, because that's the truth, and carry on by. Do you think that's appropriate? Or let's say your young child says, Mother, how was I born? And you tell them all the gory details, rather than say to them, I just got you from the hospital. That's truth, but it harms.
Yeah.
Do no harm is a sure way not to disrupt the harmony of creation. It doesn't cause a disharmony in any way. You can never go wrong by doing no harm as that central ethos.
Okay, thank you. Next question is about balancing. How should a disciple balance their spiritual practices with their worldly responsibilities?
Yes, it is about a balance. Like Buddha famously said, walk the middle road. So balance your worldly duties, because you still have to do your dharma, your karmic responsibilities. They call it dharma. Dharma means duties, your duties and responsibilities. So dharma is a very big part of spiritual practice, because you kind of suddenly abandon your family. Imagine just because you got initiated, okay, I'm going to leave my family and go to the hills. Would that be a right thing to do? No master advocates that. But they say within the framework that you have, within your circumstances, when you have a bit of free time, do your spiritual practice in a certain way, I mean meditation and so on. And even during the times when you're not able to do that, you can still be contemplating upon higher truths, thinking about it, and trying to upgrade yourself as much as you can, become a noble, more noble example of a human being. This is all part of spiritual practice. And you can do this while living in the world. Nobody has to know.
Thank you. I've got a question about community. What is the role of having a community of disciples for the disciples of the Perfect Living Master?
You see, the initial idea, especially if this comes from the past, not so much necessary now, but in the past where there was no internet, no communication, no email, no phones, when a person was initiated, they're very much alone. Imagine if the great master was passing through that village on his great journeys, walking throughout, and never to be seen again. He initiates that person, and then what? The person's got no source of comfort or example or community help to follow, that to keep them on track. So the idea of satsang or satsangi or jata in Sikhism, the community, was created to allow people to work together for a common cause, because it's much easier to progress on this path when you're surrounded by like-minded individuals than if you go it alone, surrounded by the hordes of the world. So it does make sense that a community, the role of the community is to support each other. However, as with human beings with egos who identify with their character rather than the spiritual self, then one starts pitting themselves against the other. Oh, I'm better than the other. Oh, you've made a mistake. I'm a goody-goody two-shoes. Therefore, I'm better than you. Right? And then this competition starts. This arrogance starts. So then the community fails in its support. Because then those people who may not be the greatest examples fall down and say, we're worthless, we're useless. Right? So what has the community served them? It has not helped them, because there's no love. See, when love, kindness, and the principles are there, then the community can work. Without the love being present, how can that community work? It just becomes then like a corporate community with rules and regulations, like a military camp. You must walk this way, you must do this, you must do that. And it's a military camp. Where's the love and devotion? People don't feel that. You see? So what are they getting out of that community? So in many cases today, the community fails because it doesn't give that love and support to its members. They are competition with each other. And that's not the whole point of the community. The community is that it's them against the world. But it's not like that. They're fighting each other. It's like a civil war. And if they're in competition with each other, how can they help each other? It just makes matters worse. So for those individuals who don't like this fighting, they should get out of that community. And in this day and age, we have access to information, tools, and everything. We don't need the community as such. Or we can choose a different community, one that is more conducive to what we like, what we expect from the spiritual path. It's not that this is the only community. So, one can even listen to masters talking. There's Ishwarji, Supreme Master, Singhai, and Babaji. They're all on video, among others. We can just listen to them. We don't have to physically run after them anymore. How wonderful is the world today? So, plus now, there are a lot more initiates around the world than they were before. So you can have just your local few people. You don't need a big organization anymore, where there's a lot of difficulties in managing such a big place. You can now have small groups of individuals who help each other. Because the idea of community is to help and support each other. Yeah, not to fight amongst each other, not a competition, not to create a corporate military camp.
Thank you. The last question that I've got regarding discipleship. What is the process of spiritual transformation that disciples undergo when initiated by a perfect living master?
Well, that's a big question. And to do it justice would demand a long answer, but we haven't got that time.
Edited version?
We can... You see, there's so many things that have to be met for spiritual transformation. Firstly, the karmas have to be in a position where their life is not too much of a struggle, so that they can focus some attention on spiritual practice. The second thing is their samskars, their comprehension ability must be at a certain point in which they can understand spiritual principles without it being confusing. Then the third thing is that they have to be then ready to go home. They have to be sufficiently fed up from the level of the soul that it wants to go back. The drop wants to become the ocean again. So then that has to be present as well. Then so spiritual transformation is transforming all these aspects, and the outcome of this is a change in attitude, complete change in attitude, and also in a level of awareness and understanding. So when the level of awareness and understanding is greater and their attitude has changed for the better, we can say that this is spiritual transformation. It's not something magical that people might think that, suddenly you become a God being and you're just flying around the skies, waving your magic wand and all things are happening. No, it's nothing like that. These are just fantasy, fairy tales. The reality is very different. The reality is a gradual change of that individual, brought about by managing these 3 points that I mentioned earlier, to bring them about to a point where transformation can take place in a natural and safe way. So spiritual transformation happens from within, but it has outside consequences in the sense that we behave differently, we think differently, we react differently. So there's an outward manifestation, but it doesn't start from the outside. It starts from the inside and is reflected by our attitude and behavior outside.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions regarding discipleship before I move on to initiation?
Okay, good.
Right, initiation now. First question's about misunderstanding. What is the biggest misunderstanding about what initiation is from a perfect living master?
Well, as mentioned in the introduction, they think that initiation is the beginning of their spiritual journey, not the end of it. I think that's the biggest misunderstanding. Because to get to the point of initiation, you have crossed so much ground already which you do not know about on past lives. Many, many past lives have been passed, at least 10 lifetimes of spiritual seeking to get to the point of initiation in this lifetime. Yeah? Then you're initiated, you've got there. Basically, there's nothing left for you to do, just sit and wait. But karma won't allow you to sit and wait now, to be pulled. It says, well, you know, you're a family man, you have to do this, you have work responsibility, you go about all these things. But for a true disciple who's gaining higher awareness, they lose their interest in all these things. Yes, they go about it, but they don't have their attachments to it. They don't have their obsessions by things. This is go with the flow. You know, very famous saying, the master say, go with the flow. So this is go with the flow of it all and deal with it as it comes with wisdom and practicality. So being wise and practical is the way to deal with all these things through whatever knowledge base you have at that time. And so in that sense, that is the biggest misunderstanding, that somehow when you become initiated, you're beginning your journey and there's all these struggles and difficulties, when actually you've come to the end of it. And now it's just perfecting. You're perfecting the art of being a spiritual being, rather than beginning from the ant all the way up.
Thank you. Got a question about karma, and you did touch on this already. Are the effects of karma lightened or made more heavy after initiation from a perfect living master?
I wouldn't say they were lightened at all. I've never met a case, because the objective is to bring that person back to their true home within a certain time limit. Therefore, if anything, the karma has to be slightly accelerated. And when it's been accelerated because of the pull, the power of pulling is much greater than your ability to push, as I mentioned. So therefore, yes, generally, initially, it becomes quite difficult. Yeah. But not more than you can cope with.
But it's smooth, like you
But it's
said.
also smoothed by the master. On one hand, you're being pulled and you feel like you're being dragged, and things are happening just one after the other at a certain pace. On the other hand, you're being softened and almost cuddled along the way, you know, by the hand of this security. There's something behind it all that's protecting you. So you're not sure whether you're lucky or unlucky.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, actually. This is about receiving initiation. I have read in books that on the day we receive initiation, the master sits inside us and waits for us. Please tell me more about this, and does initiation happen at the astral level or physical level only?
Well, I'll answer the second part first. Initiation comes not even at the astral or the physical, but at the level of Parabrahma, the level of the soul. Initiation is a soul-to-soul connection, nothing to do with the mind. So let's rule that out completely. Nothing involves the mind. The mind is just dragged along. The mind is just a tool that the soul uses to have an alternative experience in creation that is not possible in its perfect home of bliss. It's an adventurer. It's gone for an adventure. It creates a tool of a character. So therefore, this is just a tool. It has no bearing at all in the actual liberation of the soul. It's just, if anything, it's a hindrance that can be overcome by rising above it. So that's the first, and the first part is
about the master sitting inside us.
The master sitting inside us.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just a way of putting it, that the master sits inside us. Actually, the master doesn't sit inside us in any shape or form, right?
For us.
What it means is that the spiritual form, the consciousness, this master consciousness, is attached to our own in the subconscious realm. And when it becomes attached to our own, it flavors or colors the way the subconscious sends information to our conscious mind. It's constantly directing things. But because this is happening from the distance, in the distance, we don't know. Our consciousness is changing, we're taking the credit for it, we think that we're improving, so on, but actually it's the hand of the master's influence that is gradually changing to the state that we can cope with. So the mind doesn't become deranged or abnormal, because it has to be graded. So that's what's happening. Now the other part of this is that this subconsciousness extends right up to the causal realm. So it has the astral form and it has the causal form. So when you meditate, you can get in touch with this consciousness, this master consciousness within you, in the astral realm, and they call it the radiant form of the master, where you can communicate in a way that you would communicate with the physical master. Wherever your attention is, that's your reality that time. So when you go to the astral realm, that becomes your new reality. So the master's in the astral form, you're in the astral form, and you can communicate. So for that reason, masters and others have said that the master is within you, places himself within you to communicate with. And that's correct. But the misunderstanding is that this is some kind of a physical, pseudo-physical process, and it isn't. It's very subtle, and it works in a way which is a little different to our everyday thinking. Firstly, from the subconscious mind, there's a direction. The master is now directing the train of thoughts in a certain way from our subconscious mind that allows us to make, hopefully, better decisions in this physical life, or less harmful decisions. Yeah, but whichever way, because remember we have a karmic existence here, so we have to play the role wherever we've been, maybe even a villain. In fact, there's nothing stopping a villain who is fully realised from playing his part of villainy. If long as he does it very well in the master's name, then there's no reality to anything that's going on here. Although that rarely happens in this particular world, because the state of human beings right now is they don't recognise the role of villain. But in Satgurus, let's say, in a certain, what they call the golden age, villains were as important as heroes. And the villain was there to play his part in order to fulfill the play of the divine. But the villain was also aware. He had supernatural power. He also had the ability to understand. He was given the role of a villain, and he did it well. And then when everything was packed up, in the end, they all went to the same place and celebrated. The villains and the heroes sat together in the tavern, both had a pint, and said, how well did we play our part? Now this is explained in a Hindu book called the Gita, where the story explains what happens after the great war, the Mahabharata, the war between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, where one were the good ones and one were the bad. Good versus evil, basically. That's how we like to translate, so I'm going to keep it simple. But there's a lot more to it than that. But then the Pandavas, who were the goodies, complained to Krishna when they went back to Krishna consciousness and said, the Kauravas are sitting here with us. These were the villains that we spent our entire lifetime fighting against, and now you welcome them in our abode the same. You see? And Krishna said, it was only a play. Why are you getting so upset about it? So this is an example of our misunderstandings of what's going on here. We categorize things into groups like good and bad, right and wrongs, cause and consequence, and all these things. These are just explanations from the level that we're at. But when the consciousness of humans evolved in Satgurus, for example, they had a very different take on it. The villains, for example, were revered and admired as much as the saints, because they had a part to play, and it was outsmarting each other. Who could be the better philosopher? Even the villains were great philosophers. And there was this debate, right, to beat the other. So the great debates were done, not so much physical wars, right, but there's a lot of debate done, but there are also, you could say, wars as well, physical wars. But it was done in such a different way that we understand warring today. We cannot, with our simple minds, comprehend a war of that nature, where two sides can fight each other with a complete understanding of what they're doing and why. It's an interesting thing. But when the time comes, and if you're still around in Satgurus, hopefully all of you shouldn't be, because you should be elevated by then and left, then you'll be part of that game. And if we have this satsang, then it'll make a big difference. You'll understand straight away, oh yes, of course, this is just normal. Why are you telling us all these things? But now, in Kali Yuga, in this lower age, where we now enter Dwapara Yuga, I have to explain these things to you. Because your understanding is, well, I only know what I've experienced now, and my state of mind is not so evolved. But in Satgurus, the beings born there really were born with an immediate telepathic ability. They had an immediate understanding of the higher truth from birth. Nobody had to teach them even. So they went about spiritual practice, which is why we don't see anything of their structures. They built nothing. The basic things they did, they understood that sound energy was the power of creation behind everything. So they used this method of manipulating the force of nature and sound through their own human abilities to create things around them. So therefore, yes, there's some great monuments built, giant stones that we can't explain, these megalithic stones, which nobody could physically have lifted at that time, because they used sound to levitate things. Sound was everything. The art of sound science is called cymatics. Cymatics, you can demonstrate it, because if you get a membrane, like a drum membrane, and you play a sound underneath it, and you put the grains of sand on it, you'll see, depending on the frequency of the sound, you get different geometric patterns. Really intricate geometric patterns. And this is called sacred geometry. And the entire universe is resonating with this sound. Even the James Webb Telescope and the Hubble Telescope picked up a background sound in the universe, which sounded like white noise. But where's this sound coming from? It's a natural resonance of all the different activities going on, merging, so it becomes, for our ears, just white noise. But this sound generates everything in existence. And because everything was created by sound, including the cells, they could heal themselves. So they knew by resonating different sounds within the body, they could heal themselves of cancers or diabetes and everything, because everything is a disorder of the manifestation of channels, with those blockages of the channels. And that's where this yogic system, this prana and all these things came about from Adi Yogi 26,000 years ago, because he had mastered this art of using sound, mantra and everything to actually heal the body and to improve things and to even affect the forces of nature. Something totally alien to us now. When we read about such things, we just think this is mythical, this is magical, but it's actually possible. But we haven't evolved ourselves yet to that point. But saying that Satgurus, for example, they were masters of this. So they didn't need to build anything. These people spent their entire life seeking the truth. There's no need to build anything. They had small little holdings just to provide basic food for themselves. The clothing was very basic. So we see nothing of their civilization today. Yes?
Who were the masters around at that time?
Less so. Much less so.
Was Kabir one of them?
Yes, Kabir was there during the last Satgurus era. You see, because these beings born there are highly evolved already, and they're already on their set path to higher realization in the causal realm, becoming Brahmandi. There was no Sant as such. Yeah, they were just Brahmandi. So they were going to the height of Krishna consciousness, Brahma consciousness, Shiva consciousness, whatever you want to call it. That was their objective. So everything they did existed for that. So, and because they were so obsessed and preoccupied with this, what could a master come? Because there's no dukkha, there's no suffering. He could not appeal to them on any grounds, because they were happy. If they were happy, masters will carry on. If you're actually happy, what can I offer you?
Does the story of Atlantis fit in that time? Right.
Yes, there's Atlantis. It's not exactly where they said it's located. It's actually located in North Africa, Northwest Africa.
But that was during Satgurus, Atlantis.
Yes.
So
And there are many things. There are many places like Lemuria, many places that exist as well around that time. Absolutely so. And there were giants then as well, great giants, because in Satgurus the people are much taller, very much taller. So there's a lot of differences in different eras, eons that have gone past in human history.
They say they live for about 100,000 years. Average.
Not quite.
No?
But they lived for 1,000 years, yes.
Not in the Ocean of Love, it says 100,000.
It's a misunderstanding. What happens, like for example, we say that Satgurus lasts for 4,320,000. It doesn't. It's at least for 5,140 something years. What happens is they multiplied it by 360, because later on, when the philosophers came, as the yugas descended, more and more corruption goes down towards Kali Yuga. They rewrote the history, because you have to remember at that time there was an oral tradition, there was no written tradition, because nobody needed to write anything. They had perfect memory. Once they were told, they remembered. We only need books because we don't remember. If you think about it, if everything I said to you instantly remembered, why would you need to read anything ever again? So they didn't. So they had oral tradition. But later on, during the phase of Treta Yuga, lower part of Treta Yuga, going into Dwapara Yuga, in the descending phase towards Kali Yuga, then writing came in, because they couldn't remember the oral tradition didn't work anymore, so they wrote things down. But they wrote things down from memory, from hearsay, from various understandings at that level. Because at the same time as you're descending down, you're also, the level of understanding comprehension is descending as well. So now these people are writing and recording things. So the the Vedas came into being again, which are much later. They came in the Dwapara Yuga, before the Kali Yuga, the descending Kali Yuga came down. They started the first Vedas. And these were recorded based upon, and the Puranas and the Sastras, these were based upon the level of understanding they had of their interpretation of the events. So if you look at the Vedas, they do contain a lot of supernatural phenomena, which are totally alien for us now, so we say it's fantasy. But actually, it's not fantasy. It was possible. And but this was in a bygone time, thousands and thousands of years ago, before the glacial melt, the Younger Dryas period, when the glaciers melt and modern humanity starts recording itself 11,600 years ago. So we're going way past that. And, these recordings we cherish today because they're very mythical and fantastical and enjoyable read. But we don't understand them. Okay, the way it's been translated from the original language down to that, the words have been changed. Some of it is totally wrong, incomprehensible, because it's been misinterpreted from the original. So if you want to know what the original Vedas were, in fact there are 108 Vedas. We only have the 4 Vedas now. So imagine, we've lost most of them. The original 100. So when you go within, you go into the astral realm, all the records are there. You can just go and see what the reality was, and then you can compare what's written now.
Was extraterrestrial involved only during Kali Yuga?
Extraterrestrials have been visiting this planet for the last 2 billion years.
So they were around. They
yes,
were visiting.
They're here during the dinosaur period, every period. Mainly, this was a mining colony, and the main mines were settled around South Africa, and they were particularly looking for gold, not because it was a precious metal that they could wear as jewelry, but because gold has a unique property in the cosmos, in that it reflects light and radiation and heat. So it's a means by which, when you powderize it, ionize it in a certain way, you could control the dangerous rays that come from the sun and cosmic rays that kill life forms. So it's a very protective element. It has a unique property, but this planet is particularly abundant in it compared to many others. So they came here, mined this to get it. So yes, there's been alien visitors here. They still are here.
So there's truth to the Anunnaki story?
To a certain extent, yes. The Sumerians, who recorded these events 6,000 years ago, wrote about things that could not have been known at that time, like genetics, genetic manipulation, space things, even pictures of people in some sort of a protective suit and capsules and Vimana, these kind of spaceships. The drawings are really remarkably similar to what we understand today as UFOs, for example. But yes, they wrote about many spectacular things that are in the realm of science fiction. But actually, they're not science fiction. Yes, there are some romantic explanations of things, like their reasoning of explanations of why things happen. Yes, we can take that as a little bit of fantasy. But what they saw, their record of observations is true. So you have to divide the Sumerian writings into what they observed and then how they interpreted it. And sure, how they interpreted was their own understanding. But if we try to destroy the whole thing, we ignore the whole thing because we say, well, their interpretation was wrong, therefore the observation was wrong. No. The observation was there, but the interpretation was what is the problem. So, but a person who has certain understanding, yeah, they can look at these, and in the future they will be very much looking at this. More and more of these 100,000 clay tablets will be translated. We've only translated about 10% of them so far. There's a lot more yet to go through. And more, then when they find the actual cities and the things referred to, archaeology is actually finding, like Eridu. Eridu was considered to be a mythical place in the Bible and everything. The cradle of civilization. They actually found it. Archaeologists found Eridu. Even because of the cuneiform writing, it's labelled. They know this is Eridu because they found tablets there referring to that great city. So they thought, until recently, up into the 2000s, they thought this was a mythical city. It didn't exist. Yeah, it's just something written in the Bible. But they actually found it. Same with Jericho. That was blown down by sound. You know, it says in the Bible that they blew the horns and the walls crumbled. Again, sound technology. But they thought this is just mythical. But they found Jericho. They actually found the site in Turkey. So, slowly, these so-called myths from the past are revealing themselves to be true. Like even the kingdom of Dwarka in Gujarat is underwater. Because obviously, when it existed, the land was high. It was an ice age, during the ice age, so all the water was trapped in the ice. So the sea levels were much lower, 100 meters lower. And Dwarka was on the edge in the Gujarat region, on the western side, like a peninsula. That was the city. And they found it the Indian government had found it underneath the ground, some 50 meters below ground, which exactly matches the description. Until recently we never knew existed. So Dwarka itself, for those who don't know, the home of Krishna, was considered to be mythological. But now they found it. So slowly, things are uncovering to show our remarkable past and heritage, which we have forgotten about. You know, we're suffering, as Graham Hancock mentions, from amnesia. Yeah? We have amnesia about our past. And also we don't want to entertain it because it just sounds too fantastical for us now. We're so struggling with our pettiness today that we don't want to know our great heritage. In fact, knowing our great heritage would be a great help to understanding where we're heading as a human race. And the same problems that befell Atlantis and other places is coming our way. We need to learn from the past so we stop ourselves going to the same future problems.
So you feel that Graham Hancock's kind of got it pretty close now?
He's pretty right. Obviously some things are not right because he's speculating from a very human form, but he's definitely piecing well together the puzzles. He's right. He's definitely on the right track.
Very interesting.
Yeah, very much on the right track. Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
So you mentioned sound technology.
Yes.
Or other technologies. You've also mentioned humans that were giants,
yes.
very big.
Yes.
Has our DNA been changing all along these times and changing as a result of interaction with alien visitors who have been coming here for gold?
Most certainly.
Is that how?
Most certainly. There's evidence of this in chromosome 2, among others, where there's an unnatural splicing and joining of two chromosomes, chromosome 1 and 2 now, this is chromosome 2 in human beings, which is an unnatural connection because the telomeres that mark the end of the chromosome have been truncated and cut, and that doesn't happen in nature. Genetic manipulation is involved. And interestingly, the Sumerians talk about this, genetic manipulation, long before genetics was discovered in 1936. So, I mean, we're talking about 6,000 years ago. How did they even know about such things? You know? So, yes, we have been evolving, and there have been interruptions to that evolution. For example, intervention. Like in the future, we're going to have artificial intelligence. In another couple of thousand years, most human beings will be half robot, half man. We'll have enhancements built into us, implanted into our brain and everything that will make us almost supernatural. Yeah, in many ways, with super abilities. You know, we can just learn instantly any language, anything, just by connecting to the internet through the brain. There won't be any need for a machine. And computers won't exist. We'll have what we call transputers. And transputers will be small devices just implanted, mostly in the brain around it, which simply collect information and imprint it in a way that looks biologically natural. Very interesting times to come for human civilization. So at the moment now we're struggling with AI, and AI now is imitating people, and there's a big problem with AI because it's taking a lot of jobs away, and it's also imitating celebrities to condone things, to sell things. It's been misused in many ways, and this is already happening now. So technology is advancing at a certain pace. Now, if humans continue along this line, it's going to be their own destruction, their own end.
Will masters still be coming around that time?
The masters will be less and less involved in the future.
Why is that?
Because as we are now on the ascending arm towards Satyug. So now we're in the plus Dwapar Yuga since 2012. So now science, technology, intellect, and with a little bit of philosophy that's leaning towards the science philosophy, those are becoming the more powerful motivators of humankind. And people born now into that world do not want to look to the past and where we've come from. They're looking forward in this kind of excitement mode where they've been given all these goodies to play with, but they haven't been given with a manual. There's no human instruction manual on how to deal with all this. So they're just throwing themselves wholeheartedly into it in an emotional way, and they're letting it run away with them without realizing the implications to humanity as a whole, to the planet, that this is doing. But of course, eventually there will be some bright people born who step back and say, hold on a minute, we need to really think about this. This is affecting us in a certain way. You see? I mean, Babaji already mentions that he dislikes the concept of social media. Because, very much so. Because, but most people don't understand why. Because social media is subliminal messaging, brainwashing people into a certain small group of people who are running the whole social media campaign to try and make us into dummies that will follow certain views and certain guidelines which are not spiritual related, not wholesome. In fact, if anything, they're detrimental to human society. So then we need to buy certain products, we need to believe in certain things. They're dictating the pace, particularly it's divisive. You know, particularly so younger people are affected by this, because as they're growing up, they're looking at social media and they say, well, if I don't look like this, if I'm not a social media influencer, if I'm not this, then therefore I'm going to be worthless. They've lost their value as a human being. They're no longer, they have to conform to this standardization of what a human being should be, how much they should be earning, you know, how beautiful they should be looking, how to put their makeup on, or how, you know, what they should be doing. It's just nonsense. It's destroying them, but they don't see it because it's a honey trap. It's tricking them into thinking that this means success. But eventually, people will protest and come about and saying, hold on, no, we're not accepting this. This is undermining our confidence. It is making us a puppet to the big powers that are pulling the strings and controlling everything in our lives. We have no say and no freedoms anymore. So the erosion of freedoms, which is being propagated by social media as well, saying, look, this happened in the world, therefore we have to curtail another freedom. And eventually we won't be able to walk one step without a rule and regulation determining how we should place one foot in front of the other. It's getting ridiculous.
So the chaos that's going on now with all the riots in the cities and towns, is that all part of the...
Oh, this is all part of the decade of disaster I spoke about.
Yeah.
Before the 2020 started, I said this is a decade of disaster. This is a transformation decade. Because the early part of the Dwapar Yuga is marked by turmoil. So now you're putting those people who are idealists against the conformists to standards and controls, and they have to battle it out among each other. So there can be all kinds of terrible things happening in this decade until the early 2030s. So yeah, this is all part of the natural and planned evolution for this planet. Because without members suffering, you don't learn anything. Humans don't learn by wisdom. There are many wise books written, yeah, nobody's learning, but give them a bit of suffering, and then they'll do something about it, yeah. And that's the nature. So the master and Babaji sits back and watches the show, because there's an evolution that's happening to the human race as well. Now, with all this going on, imagine how upsetting this is to an average human being. Would it be much better to focus your attention and get the hell out? If you just get the hell out of it, when everybody's moaning, complaining, look at the state of the world, this is happening, it's okay, it is what it is. I'm just getting out of here. I'm not going to hear, there's no way it's going to improve. I'm not going to make it a better place. I can't, why get stressed about all what's going on? Just get out. Yeah. So that way, the Master's message is very appealing, because that gives you a means of getting out. You see? So initially, there'll be a surge towards spirituality, in the West in particular. America and the UK will become very spiritual, whereas India and China will become the new superpowers. The industrial heart, all manufacturing will move there, all the service sector will be in the West. Africa will become the breadbasket of the world. The land's going to be cultivated so it feeds the entire population. So the world is going to be divided into sectors in the future in which each one serves a particular purpose, but in a community united by this World Council. So yeah, there's a lot of changes to come. We're in the beginning of that change. So when there's change happening, it's always turmoil. Yeah. When we have any change in the work practice, suddenly new rules coming, we have to sit down, have meetings, discuss about these rules, how they're going to be implemented, all that nonsense. It's the same with the world. Yeah, people now of different consciousnesses, like the younger generation, are brought up in a certain way, governed by the social media content and the world around them. Older generation lived in a bygone, so-called innocent time, and there's a clash between ideologies occurring, and this young versus old or middle needs to be worked out. And unfortunately for human beings, their nature is to do this through violence and aggression and so on, because the emotions are very much heightened during this time, and these emotions are not being tamed or regulated in a practical way. Back in the past, a lot of debates were done, intellectual debates, Nowadays it's more about ranting and raving, and if you don't follow my way, I'm going to kill you. So it's a different world. And a lot of people rightly say not too good a world. Yes?
I have two questions and one request.
Okay.
The first question relates to how you said that at the moment AI exists externally, but we will internalize it.
Yes.
Technologically. I suspect that we will find excuse me, means of making that incorporation, from say metallic to biological eventually.
Yes.
We
Yes.
will be changing ourselves.
Yes.
Not you said we would be robotic, but
Yes.
these robots will
Yes.
continue to evolve
Yes.
to the point that we will become one biological being.
Yeah. There's two parts to that. Firstly, there's going to be the external devices that are purely electronic, and they'll be the governing devices. So the government, for example, will be basically just a machine, an AI, artificial intelligence, that governs the rules, because it's perfect memory. It has a perfect ability to just go through all the millions of rules and regulations and come up with the enactment of those rules. So governments, decision makers, everything will be artificial. Human beings will be, you could say, just there for enjoyment. So the emphasis for human beings will be not so much in working and creating things that we do now, but will be more towards pleasure seeking. And that will create a whole new industry. And with these biological implants that can tap directly to the brain, you can literally have any holographic experience you like. You can create within the mind. So there'll be people will be at home sitting there in this state of stupor, you could say, or delusion, having and enjoying these kind of holographic experiences because they don't have to go to work. So the concepts coming up in the future is very, very different to what's happening now.
So my question was, how, if that's where humanity is going, isn't that a contradiction when we consider that we are heading towards Satgurus?
No, because what happens during these periods are revolutions. Because as we've transformed from warring and the way, say, the Roman times and Egyptian times, we kind of understand that their way of life is not conducive to our way of life right now. We have hopefully improved ourselves as human beings by living in a more peaceful society, despite, yes, there are a couple of wars going, but it's nothing like it was in the past, where there was no rules and regulations governing anything that goes on. I mean, now we have wars, but then we have the Geneva Convention that direct how war should be fought even. Can you imagine that? In the future, that will be considered totally barbaric. Nobody will be warring. Wars will finish by the middle 2040s. Yeah, people will consider that a barbaric act. Similarly, nobody will be eating animals from the late 2030s onwards, because they'll consider that to be barbaric and unhealthy. The move where technology is driving and comfort is driving our future forward is towards a state where at first we'll rely on technologies to bring about what we can do ourselves as human beings, but eventually the boredom will set in. We look at thousands of years ahead of time, right? And then human beings will take over. So why do we need all this technology? Why do we have to go and work and build all this stuff, use the earth? There's a lot of time if we can do it ourselves. So at every appropriate time, people will be born with a certain awareness of knowledge to direct humanity in a certain direction. At the moment now, we have just pure physical science, but science will become spiritual science in the mid part of this century. And that spiritual science will drive us towards a greater understanding of how the universe actually operates, and therefore how to manipulate the forces of nature. So then a lot of the things that we rely on now will fall away. A lot of things that we rely on. So there's a lot of change. A lot of it's good, a lot of it's not so good. You know? So it's just, it depends. When you're born there, it will all make sense at that time. If you can preview ahead, you can look at it. But during that time, there will always be masters. But the difference is their followers will be a and a fringe group of people. It'll be very much a fringe followers, you know, and people won't mind them so much because they'll be so preoccupied with it, getting towards what they want to achieve materially. This is, it doesn't matter, it's a small handful of people chanting and whatever, it doesn't affect us. So the masters will be tolerated, they won't be persecuted at all. So there'll be no persecutions of masters, nothing. It'll just be considered that some people want out. There'll always be people, no matter how advanced we get, who want out. They're not convinced. Something in the heart says, no, I don't like this way of life. And they'll always want out. So don't worry, there'll always be masters.
So my second question comes to that point, that the Sanathan saints, even today, have always talked about wanting to be out and to be with God.
Yes, correct.
And not to have desires and obsessions, and exactly kind of guidance that you're giving us.
Yes.
And you have been giving us. They also say that, and it seems to be true, that that type of philosophy was only happening on the subcontinent, the Indian subcontinent.
Originally.
Right? So I was thinking that if you look at people living in forests, they went as far as knowing about a spiritual world in parallel to their own world. And they used that knowledge of that world to great effect to carry on their existence in the jungle. They were able to communicate one way or the other with.
That's right, this is all possible.
The surrounding, the plants.
And it become more normal as we evolve through the yugas.
Yeah, the plants, the animals, they were very connected. Their living force was very connected to the forest living force. But I don't know if they went as far as doing what the Indian saints did, and which was to follow the Sant tradition and find a way out. I say Sant because the Sanathan saints have always said that you need a guru, first and foremost. You are nothing without a guru. You know that in our Sikh tradition, one of the gurus went through this, and he brought a saint home, and the saint said, "Who's your guru?" And our guru said, "I do not have a guru," and he was very annoyed. He said, "I've been desecrated," and he left in anger.
Yes.
Yeah. So
But
So the
just to cut you a little bit short with time, but you see, the understanding of requiring some sort of enlightened being to enlighten us varies according to level of comprehension. So in that system you mentioned, the Sanatans, they only take up to Trikuti. So their need for a guru was a guru rather than a holy master, which is a different level altogether. Their job was to become Brahmandi liberated, not to get rid of the mind altogether, but to calm the mind or still the mind or pacify the mind to a point at which it no longer troubles them. So their philosophy is a little different, but it does imitate the philosophy of what happens during Satyug in a certain extent. But in Satyug is much more evolved than that. So these saints are dealing with a population today. So they follow the concept that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Absolutely correct. And a lot of the things that they do is similar to Sant, but doesn't go all the way.
That's very important.
Yeah, it doesn't go all the way. So, but nevertheless, it's a good introduction, for people who need to understand maybe a higher way of thinking. Why not? There's no harm in going through the steps. We all have to take each rung on the ladder to get to the very top. Yeah.
So the question was that why did this kind of thinking concentrate on the subcontinent? And when you say we're becoming more spiritual in the West,
yes,
actually that started from these people looking at Eastern philosophy, which originates in India.
Yes.
So even the Far Eastern philosophy came from India. Okay, the martial arts, the Amritism, meditation, healing through meditation,
and China even. But you see, the world itself. You see, as everything has a karmic time frame, timeline, so even the world has. And each nation, each country, or each group will go through their own evolutionary process. There is no significance in the fact that India at a certain period for the last 10,000 years has been the height of spirituality, and now for the remainder of the time will not be spiritual. It'll go to the West for another few thousand years, and India will become an industrial power, forgetting entirely their heritage and poo-pooing it and laughing at it as some mythological past story. There'll be no respect. The temples will be boarded up and just kept as monuments to show how ridiculous we were in the past, that we believe in such things. That is what's happening in India. So the holy land of Bharat is now becoming the commercial land of Bharat. And it's changing. So, but this is not the first time. We, in our recorded history, written history at this time, we only can go back 6,000 years or so. So therefore, we don't understand what preceded that. India has not always been the center of civilization. In fact, before that, it was Turkey, Iraq. Yeah, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran. Yeah, that's the cradle of civilization there. And that lasted for many thousands of years more than the Indian subcontinent. So you could say the Indians, they migrated over when the war started in that region, then they migrated to India. And then the India started developing these philosophies, And then there was a migration to the further east, to China. So China had their own philosophies, and so on. So the evolution of world populations is a gradual changing process as well. And just because one moment it's located here and the next moment there doesn't bear any significance.
Okay. But it might have started in South Africa.
You mean humankind started in South Africa originally? Yes, the development of the human. That's another topic for another time. We're realming into science. Human beings, anatomically modern human beings first came into existence about 287,000 years ago. Actually, to be precise. And
does that coincide with aliens coming to mine in South Africa? And
it does, but they were before that. Aliens were here for the last 2 billion years. So it's a period. The trouble is we have difficulty going back so far because looking at DNA, looking at fossil evidence from a scientific point of view now, let's say, it's difficult for them to piece all the bits together. The current theory is now that the idea that the out of Africa idea may not be the true hypothesis. That civilizations or humans apparently parallel developed in the East, around the Chinese area and the Indonesia and so on. you have unrelated populations as old or older than they should be if the out of Africa theory is correct. So there's a real problem. So they're forever pushing the date back of the origin of human beings. But the true origin is 287,000 years. They've so far got to about 250,000 years, so they're getting there. But DNA evidence, when they understand the role of junk DNA, that will eventually produce the evidence they need to show that the actual cradle, the origin of it, is not even South Africa. It's actually in Turkey. In the central area where the manipulation took place. In Africa, there were the hominids, which were archaic humans, or not the anatomically modern humans, and there was a population there. That's true. And that was being manipulated and so on. So yes, there's a lot of interesting archaeological or historic facts, which slowly somebody will eventually start pulling it all together and putting the picture, the puzzle of the human tree of life, how anatomically modern humans came into being, and the three different key races, how that division took place, and so there's a lot of bits and pieces yet to solve. But going back to spirituality, spirituality has always been there in one form or another during this time, but it's evolving. Like for the first time now, our civilizations have never seen this development of structures. Historically, in the past, when civilizations came and went, they had a very different take on what they consider civilization. Our civilization now is based on technology, so this is a technological era. So we have all these technologies now that will be left and buried in the ground for future generations. When the Satgurus come, they'll see remnants of this. We don't have this in the past, because each of the yugas are also transforming. So not only do the yugas go in a cycle, there's an evolution of the way the yugas are operating and manifesting. So you could say there's an evolutionary process going on, and the entire universe is evolving to its ultimate end. Yes. Go on.
Just as a side.
Yes.
So you mentioned megaliths and monoliths.
Yeah.
This is a very quick question. These were moved and placed the way they were using sound technology, is that right?
Mostly the really heavy stuff was used by sound only.
Okay.
That's how they could get a 300-ton object or a 60-ton object on the top of a mountain where there's no quarry nearby. It's quarry 200 miles away.
Yes.
And you're saying with a simple technology, they didn't have a wheel. There's no invention of the wheel. How could they move such heavy objects uphill and put it in position?
But furthermore, these megaliths were chiseled to fit
And carved in purple. They didn't have mortar or cement, because in those days, remember, there was no industry.
What chiseled them? What cut them? Was that sound?
They used sound technology.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
sound vibrating at different frequencies, which we're yet to discover, can cut through any substance, and sound generates light. So at the moment now, current physics thinks that light is the origin of everything, because it's the fastest thing. But actually, there's a type of sound that's faster than light, and that sound is consciousness. So when you use the power of consciousness, it's faster than anything else. But until spiritual science comes on board and they understand this, which the ancients did, they can't manipulate the forces of nature the way the past people did. And that's why we just have these incredible explanations. How did they get these giant 60-ton, 100-ton blocks up in certain positions without any wheel even? The theory is that they had these logs and rolled them up. Why on earth would they bother? Why bother doing such heavy-duty work when they could have just do what the Inca did, who took over those sites, and they accepted that, they inherited those sites, and they just built on top of it with smaller stones. Why didn't you do that? Why? Because it was easy for them. That's the answer. It was easy for them to manipulate these giant blocks and put them in position. It saves putting hundreds of smaller ones, and it would also last, because a lot of these places are built in seismic areas where earthquakes are present and so on. So in order to, if you have lots of small little blocks, they're more likely to fall apart than you have giant weighty blocks sitting on top of each other, interlocked in a certain way, cut and carved in a certain way. Then you don't need mortar. Yeah.
So I suspect once again you've probably read my mind that we're talking about sound. The meditation that now, because I'm not initiated, I cannot confirm this, that I suspect we use is based upon Kabirji's concept of sound.
Shabad. In the Guru Granth Sahib, they talk about Shabad Dun. What is the Shabad Dun?
Dun is tune, yeah?
Yeah, sound.
So,
Yeah.
So,
Shabad is the sound. Shabad describes the nature of this creative sound.
yeah.
The Shabad is a creative power sound.
Yes.
Now, it's mentioned in all the holy books about the creative power of the sound. Interestingly,
But that's
what is this sound?
Us.
The sound is within us.
Within
It's in
us.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere in creation, not just us.
But it's in everywhere in creation, because that sound is consciousness.
Yes,
Isn't
that's right.
Right.
So the sound of consciousness we call Shabad.
Yeah.
And the masters give it a term.
Yeah.
Yeah? And they call this a Shabad. And by getting in touch with our own creative consciousness, we can understand then how we came into being, where we come from, what we're made of, and how we created the mind tool.
We can use that mind tool to make these.
The mind tool is just a fun
Yeah.
character we're playing.
Okay, enormous structures. What were these structures made for? Why did we?
You mean why the megalithic structures exist?
Yes, why did this?
We're going to go into a whole history here.
Yeah.
You have to understand that in those days there was a need for gathering. We've always had the jata, we've always had a community. So that a lot of these structures were built as gathering places. And they were energy places. So these stones weren't just placed as random walls. Within them were, you could say, special type of crystalline stones that rang like a bell. So when you hit these stones, they rang like a bell. Some of these have been recovered, but most of them have been lost because they've been pillaged over the years and used in constructions and other things in the future, because they used to rob things smaller things they could take to build new structures. Historically, nobody thought of preserving archaeological sites. So things were built. But nevertheless, yes, they used to have energy centers in which they could generate sound and power. So they used to use these resonating tuneful sounds to create impressions upon the mind. It would affect the way the mind thinks. Like today we take drugs. We take hallucinatory drugs, psychedelic drugs. They use, again, sound in those cases to create states of mind which they thought was spiritual. So they had their own belief system surrounding this, and it could remove certain obstacles in the mind, certain thought patterns. You know, when people were considered mad, they used to take them to these places, resonate the sound and cure their madness. It's very interesting. The whole thing was built around this sound technology. That wasn't their only way, because they also had pasture and farmland. But those particular structures were all not only official meeting places where decisions were to be made for the society, but also particularly it's to do with getting these states of mind so that you could, and not everybody could go there. So there's a selected hierarchy. There are the priests who manage these temples. You could say they were temples of the olden days, but open air temples. They didn't have a roof. So it's an interesting thing that history will eventually unravel all of this.
But unlike today's temples, these places were concentrating power.
Purely upon sound. They're all based upon semantics, upon sound. Yes.
And of course, once built, they exist side by side with the humans as we evolve, and as we become dumber, we use it for other things. Yeah, then the Mayans and the Incas accept the fact that they built on top of these existing structures, which is why when you look at them, you see these big giant stones at the bottom, with smaller stones on the top. Yes, yeah.
And historians or archaeologists at first thought, well, this was built by the Inca, because they were the ones who were found populating it. But the Inca themselves said, no, we didn't build the bottom part, we just built the top part. We just added to it.
Okay, so my third, sorry, we're running out of time, so my third item, the request, is please could we have another podcast session, a long one, on this type of thing.
That is your particular interest. It's not really the objective of what we're here for, but I certainly don't mind answering individual questions related to it rather than giving an entire podcast on this, because this doesn't save you in any way. The idea of these sessions is to take you to a higher state of consciousness, not to look at history.
I take your point. My interest is related to why I come here, because again, alongside these things happening, you've said that there's always has been and there always will be people who are associated with masters, and
there'll always be masters here, and there'll always be disciples,
and they see beyond this. And my interest is in knowing how the idea of consciousness, how we took the idea of consciousness as we lived our lives with these technologies. And that brings us to today's time as well.
I think the main focus that you should be really concentrating on is your own personal development. As a human being, what is your role here on a personal level? What you should be doing to elevate yourself to that higher state, that you don't have to ask me any of this. Because I can only tell you something, but it's not your own experience. When it becomes your own experience, it's much more valuable. So the objective of these sessions is to empower you, to teach you how for it to become your own experience, rather than asking 1,000,001 questions. Because the history goes back infinitely, the history goes forward infinitely. How much time have we got in this human lifetime to go to all of that?
Okay, so again, I have
concentrate on the spiritual matter at hand now.
Yeah.
And you'll find all these things for yourself, if that is still your fascination when you go with it.
Okay, so again, Babaji, you are spot on. The only thing that matters is my own.
Concentrate on your own personal development. That would be my advice to you.
Absolutely right.
And any other information just supports that, but the focus of attention should be just that.
As we say, Satgurus,
yeah.
Babaji on that point. But I remain fascinated with life.
It's okay to have it as an interest, but this is not the forum for it here. Not everybody shares your interest, okay?
But you're the only one who talks about these things.
I'm not the only one, there are others. But you can go on YouTube and you could look about these things like Graham Hancock and a couple of others. And there's a lot of debating shows talking about little bits and pieces of this.
Yeah, but do they relate it to spirituality?
Not necessarily, but if it's your interest to find out the historic side, then that's fine. But I would like to, for the sake of the others here in the audience, move on with the questions to focus on the theme for today.
Thank you for your time.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. Just to recap, these questions are about receiving initiation.
Yes.
So the question is, if someone has received initiation but does not meditate, does the master still come to take them home at the time of death?
Technically, yes. See, initiation is a grace. It is not a condition. Once the grace is dispensed, it cannot be undone. No matter what you do, the master has made a promise, even if you break your side, to collect you or to serve you at the time of death. Now, the manner in which the disciple is served at the time of their death depends on what level of attainment they have achieved in this lifetime through spiritual practice. So the outcomes will differ, but still the master will appear for them in one form or another, definitely at the time of death. So, but the manner of that will definitely be different for somebody who really threw themselves wholeheartedly into spiritual practice, as opposed to a casual bystander who didn't take it too seriously. There's quite a difference in the outcome.
So how will the manner be different for one?
You want the substance on this?
Okay. What's the worst? What's the best? I don't know. How do you want to?
Okay, let's try to simplify it because there's many different scenarios. Let's say somebody has not meditated at all. Okay, they've not meditated, not really done anything about it. They got initiated and just carried on living their life, almost as if they're not initiated. But let's say they stuck to a vegetarian diet or not taking alcohol, certain types of things. They follow some basic minimum criteria, right? So for them, they when they're greeted by Master, what they will get is a very practical, instructional Master who will give them instruction of where they've messed up and say, now you have to correct this. There's a certain thing, so they'd have to spend their time undergoing certain kind of, let's say, lessons. Let's put it that way. There's no real word to describe it, but there's lessons to be learned, let's say, and they will be put through their paces in order to redress the balance. Because if they're to move forward, they have to reach a point of attainment or awareness where they can be moved in that position. And the Master is always, unlike the King Judge, done him right, who is an absolute, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, without mercy. The Master, despite your failings, is always merciful. And although the difficulties of what you have to undergo to bring yourself to that level of requirement might be a little difficult, the Master's there to support you. You could say it's like being born here. You're born here in certain difficult circumstances, but the Master's there to support you. But life is still difficult. So that person may even have to return into the animal form. Let's say they ate meat and drank and did everything. Let's say they did everything the opposite. They would have to go into the animal form for a while to get this out of their system, the animal behavior, until they get fed up. And then they're brought back into human form. So it might take a little detour, for example. There are so many avenues, so many means that which the Masters have to transform that disciple in one way or another. The easy way and the hard way, right? So let's divide into easy and hard, right? That's an easier thing. So yeah, they would have to be put there, they'd have to be born again maybe, and then become human. They'd have a short life, and even then, born as an animal, they'll be an animal to a satsangi family, let's say. So they'll be well taken care of, but they'll still be in their lower form, and they're just catching up. All of this done with loving kindness, you see. Next time when they come into the human form, they would have carried that impression within them of that feeling of a need, of urgency to do your spiritual practice because of the consequence. And they don't know the subject of it. The feelings and expressions are carried on life after life, not the memories. The memories are stored in the Akashic record, you can have a look. But the feelings, the effects are definitely carried in you. So you have likes and dislikes generated within you and you don't know why. Yeah, but they come from past encounters. So this generates this next level of feelings that allow you to make progress. All of it, from the Master's point of view, is geared towards you making spiritual progress. It's not a punishment. So in other words, Masters do not dish out punishments like some people think, oh, Master will punish you if you don't do your spiritual practice. No, that's not the case. But certainly, some kind of process has to be put into place to transform you, to help you along the way. Now, for somebody who's done their spiritual practice, done everything right, for them the experience is altogether different. The Master comes almost with a raging chorus of rapture. It's a very happy experience, bright, light, cheerful, the sound accompanying, trumpets you could say, everything. Yeah, the chorus comes to greet them and champions them, and they're held as a champion. And the Master says, okay, what do you want to do now? You have a choice. So the Master gives that one a choice, which is unheard of in evolutionary process. But the Master says, well, you're not in the karmic court now. You've got to a certain point. Now you have a choice. You can either go back, let's say, because you're not at a point where you can go to such calm yet. But let's say you've got to a point where you can make a choice. So you can either go back into the physical world, live another 70, 75 years and finish the job, or you can sit for a couple of thousand years in meditation in the astral realm or the causal realm. The Master gives you a choice, you see. So that's a whole different experience altogether. And then the third level, of course, is those ones who have become realized in this lifetime. The Master takes them to Satgurus straight. So there's different outcomes to this meeting with the Master. Not it's not, it's very different. As many outcomes as there are individuals. So it's really difficult to try to explain. I can just give you the gist of it, examples of different levels. But it's a very individual and personal experience you have upon death.
Thank you. I received initiation last year, but I haven't made any progress, which makes me feel guilty. Can I still make a fresh start again now?
Yes, forget the past, move on. Always take every day as a start. Make that day the most important day in your life, and also the last day of your life. Treat everything, whatever you do, as if it's the most important and also the last day of your life. That way you can never go wrong. You'll always do your best.
Thank you. Before receiving initiation, I was very motivated, but after receiving it, that sense of urgency has disappeared. How can we bring back that urgency so that we are ready to meditate every day?
This is quite normal, because in order to bring someone onto the path, the master has to pull a few strings. Has to give you previews and a few little enticements to get you to that level. Because the soul now has awakened, the mind is not on board. What's going to happen? The master now has to a little bit get the mind interested in these things temporarily, to try and get the mind to say, yes, I want initiation. Okay? So then there's a process involved. Now when the initiation is done, that work's done, that falls away. Now the person is left in their raw state. And if their raw state is a bad boy or a bad girl, then that's what they're going to become, right? And then they have to work their way up. You see? So that's why I think there was a great master who initiated a disciple. And disciple, before the initiation, they wanted an experience. And they said, well, great master, we love everything you say, everything's fine, but I want to see something, I want to know something for sure before I get initiated, to make sure that this is right for me. So master said, okay, you sit tonight and I'll come and visit. So they did their meditation, because in those days, even before initiation, you could meditate, but not using the 5 names, but just using Satnam. So the master visited them inside and gave them a wondrous tour of the astral realm, and showed them everything and so on. And of course the next morning, when that disciple came out, this meditation and sleep, and they thanked Master, thank you so much. Please give me initiation right away. I can't wait. And Grand Master said, okay, okay. I take it you enjoyed the little experience. He said, yes. I was very satisfied. So then Master said, look, initiation is happening on this date of this month. Right? So that's, when the initiations were done in group. So he said, I'll put your name on the list. So after that, he never had an experience. Yeah. So then he got initiated, and he was expecting at that time to have the same experience. So after about a couple of weeks, after being initiated and actually having the names and all the full words and knowing how to listen to the sound, nothing happened for him. And then he was upset. So he went to Great Master. He said, Master, what is wrong? He said, I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. It's been 2 weeks. And Master said to him, you were given a preview just to encourage you to come to the path, the promise I made with you in the past. Now you have to spend 20 years getting to that point through practice. Because your karmas are in the way. You have to clear 20 years of karma, then you can get to that point. So this is how things work. So that's why sometimes you have this motivation before you get into the path, and then it all falls away for a while, and then you have to get down to the hard work.
Thank you. Before receiving initiation, I had a lot of time for satsang and reading books, but after receiving initiation, life took a turn. I got a job, and since then, there's been a lot of pressure at the office, and I don't have time. Is this all happening intentionally to finish old karma?
Everything is karma to start with. But again, because they're initiated, everything happens with meaning in life. Whereas for a non-initiate, karma is just karma. It is what it is. For an initiate, it simply means although they're paying their karma, they can do something about it during that time, which is simple contemplation. It doesn't mean that just because you can't sit for 2.5 hours that there's nothing else to be done. No. If you contemplate and think about everything you're doing from the spiritual perspective point of view, you keep remembering the master, you keep attending satsangs where you can, or receiving darshan and so on. Slowly this builds up momentum within you, and it changes you into a practitioner. So don't worry about the fact that your particular journey has taken a little sidetrack in the world, because these karmas have to be fulfilled. But actually, as long as you keep in mind, again, forget the books and the ideals as written, that unless you sit for 2.5 hours, unless you contact the Shabadun within, unless you see the visions, you're not going to go anywhere, you're not going to be successful. Forget all of that. That's not true. Yeah, this is an ideal. Masters know your limitations when they initiated you, so they're never disappointed in your abilities. So all they say is, as much as you can, to the best of your ability, where you can put your hand in the heart and stand in front of the master, I did my very best. Do your best to follow the spiritual path. And should you fail, trying your very best, then all your attempts, all your thoughts about it, all your wishing for it, master will turn them into success on your behalf, without you having to have gone through all of that. So don't worry, masters are very benevolent, very kind, very forgiving. They're not like humans. You've got to think they don't have the human mentality that you have, where you look at the world in a judgmental way. They don't do that at all. They are only love personified, kindness personified. They find every excuse to help you. Every excuse within the law of karma. They can't defy the law of karma. They can't go against the law. That's why Jesus said, I've come here to uphold the law, not to change it. But within the law, within the boundaries, they try to help you. But just do your very best.
Thank you. I've heard in satsang that if we receive initiation from a perfect living master, then we only need to spend a maximum of 4 lifetimes in this world before reaching Sachkhand. But if someone wants to reach the final goal in this lifetime, what can they do on their part?
You see, as we spoke earlier, it's very difficult for you to do anything of your own accord. When the time comes within you, you get what some people call the calling or the pull. And this has got nothing to do with a thinking mind. This is something deep within you that creates a need to do something spiritual. The need, when it becomes need-based, success is assured. So if they want to know, the question should be not what they can do to guarantee, because the outcome is not in their hands, but how can they tell if they're going to make it in one lifetime or not. And that is if the spirituality, the drive towards this spiritual experience becomes such a need that they cannot live without it, just like air, like water, they need it, then they're absolutely assured. And if you look at the story of the past saints, I often recommend reading the book called The Voice of the Heart by the Radhaswami Satsang group from Vyas. It's a very good book because it tells you the accounts of these saints' personal journey, from starting to get these feelings within them but not being able to do it, to actually the achievement in the end. Now all of these did it in one lifetime, but the intensity of their seeking, yearning and desire for this diligence is shown in this book. So if you want to understand what marks a person who's destined to receive this full enlightenment and in one lifetime, as opposed to something who's going to take 4 lifetimes, it's written there. Yes.
How do I know if I weren't initiated in my past lives?
You won't, unless you go within and have a look. But if you're initiated in this lifetime, it's most likely you were initiated in the past. If you don't get initiation in this lifetime, see, once you're initiated in any lifetime, you'll definitely get initiation in the next one if you have to come back.
Okay, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a question about inner experience. When a non-initiated person has a near-death experience, their life completely transforms because they realize that there is life after death. So why don't the Holy Masters give inner experiences to all the initiates once initiated? And they go on to say, many initiates meditate their whole lives but still don't have these experiences, and seeing this can lower motivation.
Yeah, this is a mind level question. Okay, the mind sees the world in a very different way to the evolutionary progress of the world. There's a lot more at stake than your individual journey in this creation. You are part of a whole matrix of events that's occurring. Now, Master, as Jesus mentioned, he said, I've come here to uphold the law. Now, the law has to be fair. Masters can only allow certain things to happen or because it's part of your script. The script has been written and the master won't change the script. The only time that script will be changed will be if you completely surrender yourself. You get to that point of complete surrender to the master, then anything is possible. But let's assume that's a rare event. So let's talk about the norm here. If master decided, okay, let's now every initiate, we're going to give them some wonderful experience. What will be the first thing an initiate who's undeserving of this experience, they haven't reached that level of how to deal with this experience, will do? They'll talk about it to everybody. They'll tell their workmates, they'll tell the family, they'll tell everybody what will happen to the master. He'll be mobbed. He'll be mobbed by insincere masses. You have to understand that the objective of the master is to save the marked souls, the ready ones. And this must be done appropriately. The other thing is that masters do not favour one to the other. He doesn't say, I'm going to give an experience to this one and not to that one. It has to be based on some law. And that law is karmic law coupled with your script. So in your script you have a timeline when something's going to happen. And the masters won't change the timeline of events. So if your time has come, then upon initiation or just after, an experience will be given to you. But not because you're favoured in any way, not because you're special in any way, because master does not discriminate against anybody, but because it's in your timeline. You've already done past work, you've been initiated before. So these type of experiences only occur when somebody's already been initiated in the past. For initiation of the first time, they won't have any kind of experiences straight away or for some time. It can take many years. But the point is that there are no failures on this path. If we gauge our entire belief system on visions and experiences alone, rather than the magical transformation of our inner being into a more saintly, happier, rational, aware individual, then we've missed the concept of spiritual truth completely. Spirituality is not a religion. This is something far, far above that. This is a real transformation of the self. It's not about seeing or hearing anything. You know, when I started this journey, I haven't mentioned this before, so I'll say it again. My first request to Master was, I'm not interested in sightseeing. I don't want to see more illusion, more elaborate, wonderful illusions. I only want to see the high truth. My obsession is with the high truth and only the truth. I'm not interested in sightseeing. So for a long while, no sightseeing. You know, that was done. I didn't lose heart that way. I didn't think I must, because I already knew from past life experiences, which was inherent in me, that this was not the way forward. These riddhi-siddhas and these seeings and hearings, and that was not really true. All of this is within the mind realm, and I wasn't interested in the mind, anything to do with the mind, no matter how miraculous and wonderful it was. I wanted to go straight to the ultimate, you see. And that was a single focused obsession of mine, and nothing could deter me from that. Despite reading all the books of these wonderful experiences, having this chat with the masters, I wasn't interested in any of that, because I know it's all illusion. It's all just an encouragement along the way. I already was committed. I didn't need the encouragement. Yeah, I was already devoted. So therefore, I wanted the truth ultimately. Or I didn't want anything interim, because I also know that these things can distract you. You could be kept in these places for ages, because if you start seeing things in the eye, you're going to stay around there. You're going to say, I want a little bit more, let me just take this, show me this and show me that, and of course masters comply, because your will is their command. So, I didn't want to go down that road. But that's my personal journey, right? I understand that some others want to take the long road. They want to take the long way back home. So they want to go sightseeing on the way. So, people have different needs. And Master does provide what you need, but not what you want, but what you need, actually. For some people, the sightseeing route is okay, because they've just started a journey. They need a little bit of encouragement, even in the astral form and even in the causal form, because remember, they're also in their own little way going through this motion. So yeah, it's all for that. It's all for these higher forms as well of yourself. That's why, there's a very famous case of this with Baba Jamal Singh, who his master was Swamiji Maharaj, who is considered the founder of the Radha Swami movement. He coined the phrase Radha Swami in Bias, which is now centered in Bias. And Baba Jamal Singh used to be an ardent meditator. He was, although he was in the military, serving his military duties, he used to sit long periods in meditation. And he was in a blissful samadhi state, but he didn't see anything or hear anything. But he was in a blissful state nonetheless, because his attitude, his inner core had changed and transformed with faith and love. And the feeling that he had, the telepathic feeling, was enough to overwhelm him without needing to see or hear anything. So when he wrote a letter, there was time for leave, when he was having some leave, and you had to ask at that time permission to go visit the master. So he wrote to Swamiji Maharaj and said, I'm having some leave coming up. Please allow me to visit you. I miss you so much. He missed him so much because he didn't see him inside. He had no inner darshan, no visible. But he was a great meditator. He became a great master in his own right. So then Swamiji wrote back to him, and this was by snail mail in those days, no internet, so it took several days, weeks even, for the letters to go back and forward. So you can imagine the frustration of waiting for this reply, for quite some time, not even knowing if you'll get a reply, not even knowing if the letter will get there. But he got a reply saying, my dear son, very glad to see you flying in the higher realms. Very glad to be seeing that you're achieving all of this. He said, carry on the good work. And that was all that was mentioned. So Baba Jamal Singh was really confused by this. He said, well, hold on a minute. Neither has he told me I could come to see him, nor has he got it right, because I don't have any inner visions. I don't see anything. So he concluded, he must have written the letter for somebody else, and I got it by mistake. So he wrote the letter back saying, Dear beloved master, I miss you so much, but I wrote you a letter about coming to visit you, permission to come and see you. But you gave me this letter saying all these things, which I don't think are for me. I think they were for somebody else. Please can you reply to my request? So then again, a couple of weeks later, eventually got a reply, and Baba Swamiji Maharaj at that time said to him again, I'm very glad to hear that you're doing so well, because he mentioned a little bit about he's spent so much time in meditation and he's missing, and it's creating a missing feeling, right? He's very glad that you're soaring high in the higher realms. And but nothing again about coming to see him. So Baba Jamal Singh was a little confused by this. He's thinking, maybe there's somebody else with the same name. So he gave his address, he gave more details about who he was, when he was initiated. He said, I think you made a mistake here, master, that you're referring to somebody else. I'm not having any inner visions or anything, and you've not answered my question of coming to see you. So on the third letter that arrived, then he didn't say all that. He said, no, there's no mistake. I'll explain everything when I see you. Please come and visit me on this and this, that. Very short letter to the point. Right? So then Baba Jamal Singh went to see Swamiji Maharaj and greeted him the usual way. And then he did a satsang. So he attended a satsang. So Swamiji did a very lovely satsang. And in those days, satsangs would last for 3 or 4 hours. So don't complain, these ones last too long. A lot longer in those days. And so after this long satsang, then you could put your name down to see the Great Master, have a personal meeting. So obviously Baba Jamal Singh wanted to greet his master personally and talk to him about, how he's getting on and so on. So yes, he was accepted, and it came to the point where he was the last one on the list, actually, even then. Last one on the list. Imagine the frustration of waiting for everybody and not knowing, because the master can leave any time and not see you. So just because your name's on the list didn't guarantee that you were going to be seen. So he was last on the list as well. So you can imagine this is a real test, of faith. Anyway, so he was last on the list, and he did get seen. And then he, after greeting him with Radha Swami and so on, then Swamiji Maharaj said, "So, son," he called him son, he treated him like his own son. He said, "How can I help you?" But he said, "Well, I've written these letters, and this is your reply, and I'm really confused now, because I don't have any experiences, and I don't think it's me you're talking about. You're confusing me with somebody else." So Swamiji said, "Oh, okay, let's see." He said, "Sit with me in meditation now, and I will show you what I was referring to." So he sat there with the master, and master took him up to the very height of the causal realm and showed him what he was achieving there. And after some time, they came back into the physical form, and then Swamiji asked Baba Janel Singh, "So, son, are you satisfied now that what I wrote about was the truth?" Even if he didn't see it, he said, "Very satisfied." He said, "Thank you, thank you." He said, "Now I'm not asking you whether now you have changed it. I'm talking about when I wrote the letters to you at that time, when you protested that you were seeing nothing and nothing was happening, you weren't making any progress. Were you flying high in the realms?" That he said, "Yes, master." So he said, "Have I satisfied?" He said, "Yes, I only want your darshan." And he was very satisfied. And then he carried on until he got to the point where, when he left the military, he could now have the inner darshan, because that would distract him. Let me explain to you about inner darshan and inner experience. This is only given to people who are able to deal with it. When you have an inner experience of the master, or inner, it transforms you completely. It sends you senseless. Imagine now you're a family person, raising children, working hard, doing all this. If you gave such a person that experience, they would abandon their duties immediately. The tendency is that. So there has to be a balance struck between allowing them to have these experiences within in the astral form, but not seeing them in the physical. The progress is being made regardless. So people think that they've been meditating for 20 years and not seen anything, that they've somehow wasted time. No, there is no failure on this path. No time is wasted. Every breath, every heartbeat you spend on this journey is counted in your credit. And there's two ways of delivering this credit. If you happen to be a person unmarried and not really having too many duties, no dependence, no responsibility, then this thing can be shown to you in this lifetime. The progress can be shown as it's going on, because it's not going to affect you. Or if you're a family man and you've chosen that route, the karmic says that you have to live a family race, then it's shown to you at the time of death. Then suddenly all this wealth is handed to you. And you suddenly realise, oh my goodness, all this that I have done actually amounted to something. You see? So then again, that's another wondrous experience that's given to you by a master at the time of your death, for those individuals that I forgot to mention earlier. So yeah, this seeing and experiencing business, it's not necessary for spiritual progress, but it can be given to those who really don't have too much attachments or involvement with the world, because although they will just become more distant or remote from everybody around them, how is it going to affect anything? Because they're already like that. They're already inclined that way anyway. So it's not going to affect the smooth running of creation. But if all satsangis who are involved so many responsibility and they're so attached, if their roots are in the world, how can Master pull them so abruptly? Imagine the shock that you're so engrossed in your work, earning your living, struggling, and suddenly the Master reveals that this is all nonsense. What are you going to do? You're going to be disturbed. You're mentally going to go crazy. You can't cope. You wouldn't be able to cope with this confusion, because on one hand you're dragged into this world of having to stress about all these things. On the other hand, it's all nonsense. What should you do with it? It's very confusing. Masters never cause harm. You know the principle of do no harm. even if that means withholding the grace for the appropriate time to deal with, right? So never feel that this is time lost. Every moment is counted number of heartbeats and breaths. Every heartbeat and breath you spend in thinking about the Master, thinking about the truth, practicing it, and so on, is in your credit. It's money in the bank, and it does not depreciate. It doesn't go down. No one can take it away. It's guaranteed. Yeah? So I can certainly give you that assurance.
Thank you. I've got two last questions regarding initiation, then I've got some general questions.
Okay.
This question relates to the precepts. Why are Master Cheng Hai, Babaji and Ishwar Puriji precepts different from each other? If an initiate has been initiated by multiple masters, which precepts should they, for the initiate, follow?
They're not different, just the wording of them is different. The concept behind them is the same. The problem is that this is why I've narrowed it down to just 3. Then somebody's going to say, oh, well, you're now saying that out of the 5 there's only 3. But the essence of the precepts are what? To do no harm. Seek the truth. Do your spiritual practice. Yeah? And fulfill your duties and responsibilities in life in the proper manner. That is the essence of these. And to do no harm, increase no judgment. So the fact that I've narrowed it down in this way, Supreme Master Ching Hai mentions her 5 precepts, and they're actually relating to the same thing. They're not different. There's no conflict at all. If you look at what they're saying, they're essentially saying the same thing, but the wording is different. Depending on the community they're speaking to, the peoples they're speaking to, their words have to be different.
Thank you. Last question regarding initiation. If an initiate's life circumstances is getting too difficult and affects his or her mental or physical well-being, can they choose to change the situation so their life is more peaceful, less problematic, less stressful, and less contact with other humans? Or does the initiate have to go through the difficult circumstances even though it feels it's affecting and even stopping their spiritual progress?
This is based upon ability. You see, if they're given a way out, an opening in which they can escape the misery, why not take it? No harm in that. You don't have to be miserable. This is not a path of suffering, a path of misery. This is a path of getting out of it. So if they're given a way out in which they can make choices or abilities to get out of the suffering, what wrong is there for that? No harm in that. Similarly, if they can't escape, they're trapped in a certain way where they have to endure this misery, then they should do so with the understanding that it is just a karma, not to personalize it, not to point a finger at anybody, but to say this is all the Lord's will, it's all Moj. Yeah? Hukum, as they say in Sant. So if it's the hukum, the divine will of the Lord, then bear it with an understanding that ultimately the Lord will help you and protect you. And you will go through this smilingly. So bravely face this with your spiritual practice. So, yeah, make sure that you keep understanding of what is in your best interest. Either way is good. If you have an opportunity to get out, then take that route. If you can't, then suffer it in peaceful and harmonious silence with faith and trust that Master will help you cope with it in ways that you cannot foresee. What might look like impossible suddenly becomes possible. Both ways is problem is solved.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, and this relates to pious living, which was last month's satsang topic. In previous satsangs about pious living, you have said, do no harm and find another way. Can you speak about this regarding gardening and yard care? It is quite possible to catch a spider in the house and take it outside without harming it. But in the garden and orchid, there are numerous aphids and other small insects that will happily destroy entire crops if left alone. I feel terrible about spraying them with water or anything else, but there seems to be no choice if we want to keep our fruit and vegetables plants alive. And if we won't mow the grass, it goes to weeds, which looks a mess, and the neighbours will be very unhappy in our area. What should we do about these types of challenges?
Yeah, I mean, the problem here is in understanding the concepts. When we say do no harm, we mean intentional harm. That means you go out there when there is a way out, an obvious way out, and you intend to harm. Then that's different. Now in this situation, a farmer, let's say. Now a farmer's job is to produce crop for the population, to feed the population. The objective in his mind is to feed the population with the minimum amount of biohazard or harm to the environment and to the planet. Within that means, there are certain possibilities and non-possibilities. The objective is to do the best he can to minimize the amount of harm. And there is always ways around this, in the sense that you can use biological controls, using plants which are more resistant to, say, aphids or other things. There's companion planting. So if he goes down the organic route, right, he can certainly, if he wants to make a change, yes, go down the organic route and use certain methods of natural biological controls. Then, but spraying water is not going to cause any harm. It's not going to kill them, you know. But certainly, with the viewpoint of compassion and kindness always, then and a certain amount of tolerance, you might lose a small percentage of the crop. Fine, okay, let them have their feed as well. But you have to be practical. You have to take a practical stance on this and do the best you can within the circumstances, because karma has placed you in this circumstance. So now you're stuck. You have this farm or this garden to take care of. How are you going to manage it? You can't just walk away. So you have to do it to the best of your ability given your karmic circumstances. Now you have to understand that from the Lord's point of view, judgment is not involved. But if you start getting involved in the judgment game, then judgment will be involved from the powers that be, the Kal, the negative power, who's involved with judgment. So let's say you become a noble human being in every way, forgiving and loving and kind, forgiving others who wrong you. Will the Master not forgive you for the few insects that suffer in maintaining this crop? If you do anything in the Lord's name as well, then all is forgiven automatically. Because whatever karma you have to impose, good or bad, be a villain or a saint, has to be done, has to be met. So it's your attitude that matters, and a practical approach you take to bringing this attitude forward that's important, rather than trying to make things too complicated. Yeah? So the intention is, yes, there are biological methods, but also his attitude is he's not intentionally going out to harm these. He's aware enough. The fact that he's thinking about such things, when so many farmers do not, is merit in itself. And the fact then that he will hopefully go about trying to minimize the harm caused whilst getting the crop that he needs. Yeah, this balance, then don't worry too much. And then maybe, if it's too difficult for him to manage, an opening will be given where he can escape and do something else. Who knows what the Lord may provide, but do everything in the Lord's name and always with kindness.
Thank you. I've got a question about Sant teachings. Should a serious spiritual practitioner distance themselves from family members if they do not agree with the Sant teachings, as these teachings can appear to be very controversial to the unenlightened?
I think there should be, principle here is do no harm. If by suddenly distancing yourself in a shocking manner harms the family, then you've lost the meaning here. If you gradually withdraw from events, realizing that where things are not your duty, they're not involved in duty, but they're more social activities, certainly you can start reducing, you're turning up, making excuses here and there. No harm with that. But you should fulfill your duty as a family member. Whatever that duty involves, you should complete that duty. But at the same time, not judge them for their belief system, And also be smart, be wise. Don't talk about it. If you know they're against Sadmat, then why mention anything about it to them? It's your own private connection between you and the Lord. It doesn't involve anybody. Yeah, keep it to yourself then. Yeah, but don't judge them for not understanding yet. Their time has not come. Then you might feel a little bit uncomfortable in their company. Gradually distance yourself. Do gradually, nicely. Always with kindness and compassion and tolerance in mind. When you have certain ways of looking at things, automatically the answers come. So once the attitude changes, then automatically you know what to do.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions?
That's it. We're all done. I think they're all hungry, long awaiting their lunch. So okay, we hope to see you all next month and hope you enjoyed this satsang.
So dehi paje har ki sev pajo gobind pul mat ja मानस जानम का एही लाभ